In today's episode, we share some of the scariest shark encounters ever recorded. From a woman being swallowed whole by a massive shark to two little boys being eaten not by one but 8 great whites. Let's dive into the first attack. It was a bright sunny morning on June 7, 2024 when Anne Blair Gribben set out with her twin daughters Lulu and Ellie and a group of friends on their first ever beach trip. Seacrest Beach, Florida was the perfect spot for the summer getaway. The warm sand beneath their feet and the gentle waves of the ocean made it an idyllic escape from their small Alabama town of Mountain Brook. The girls, full of energy and excitement, couldn't wait to immerse themselves in the adventure that lay ahead. The day unfolded with carefree laughter as they played volleyball, swam in the crystal clear waters, and basked in the summer sun. By mid-morning, they decided to explore the deeper waters around the first and second sandbars. Armed with a boogie board and a hot pink sparkle float, they ventured into the ocean, laughing and marveling at the marine life, collecting sand dollars as small mementos of their adventure. But as the girls reached the second sandbar, a subtle shift in the water caught their attention. The waves had grown a bit stronger and the once clear water began to take on a murky hue. It was enough to make the group uneasy, but they shrugged off their worries. Their curiosity took the lead, and they swam down to touch the bottom, ensuring the sandbar was safe. The tide shifted, the water murkier still, but they were determined to continue their fun. After a while, Ellie suggested they take a break and head back to the shore. The girls, exhausted from hours of swimming and sun, agreed. They began to make their way back, the soft rhythm of the waves lapping against their legs. But as they swam through the waist-high water, an ominous presence made itself known. Adele, one of their friends, was the first to see it. A shark fin cutting through the water, circling the group. Panic spread like wildfire. Adele screamed, her voice sharp and frantic, alerting the others. Lulu's twin Ellie felt the cold grip of terror, but she instinctively began to swim faster, not looking back to see if the others followed. As she reached the shore, she turned to see the horror unfold. The water, once serene, was now tainted with blood. Lulu, her sister, was still in the water, fighting a relentless predator. A bull shark, its powerful jaws locked tightly around Lulu's arm, dragged her beneath the surface. The 15-year-old thrashed desperately, trying to escape, but the shark was unyielding. It clamped down on her left hand, tearing it away before moving to her right leg. Blood stained the water, dark and shocking, as Lulu struggled to keep her head above water, gasping for air, each breath feeling more like a battle than the one before. Ellie screamed, her voice hoarse with panic. "That's my sister," she cried, her voice trembling as she watched her twin be dragged under. The beachgoers, once blissfully unaware of the looming danger, now scattered in fear. Ellie's heart pounded in her chest as she begged for someone to help. The world seemed to slow, her vision blurring with tears as she clung to the faint hope that someone would reach Lulu before it was too late. The shark finally released Lulu and retreated, but not before leaving her with devastating injuries. Ellie, desperate to help, dove back into the bloodied water, holding Lulu's head to protect it from the crashing waves. Minutes felt like hours as a group of men and doctors who had been vacationing nearby rushed to assist. The chaos around them was a blur, but Ellie stayed focused on her sister, holding her close despite the gruesome sight of her injuries. And their mother arrived moments later. The sight of her daughter, pale and motionless on the sand, was something no mother should ever have to witness. Ellie could only manage a single sentence before the weight of the scene overwhelmed her. "Mom, it's Lulu." Anne collapsed beside her daughter, tears streaming down her face as she took in the horror before her. Volunteers and doctors worked quickly to stabilize Lulu, as the haunting sound of screams and sirens echoed across the beach. An airlift was called and Lulu was rushed to Sacred Heart Hospital in Pensacola, an hour and 20 minutes away. Throughout the ordeal, Ellie remained by her side, holding on to the hope that Lulu would survive. But when doctors revealed the extent of her injuries, it was clear that the attack would leave scars, both physical and emotional. Lulu's right leg had to be amputated just above the knee, and her left hand was also lost in the shark's attack. She had also lost nearly 2/3 of her blood supply, and she was in critical condition. Despite everything, Lulu fought to survive. She emerged from the darkness of unconsciousness, her first words a testament to her strength. "I made it." Even as her body was scarred, she maintained her determination. Lulu, who had always dreamed of becoming a doctor, insisted on watching the removal of her central line, her spirit unwavering in the face of the unimaginable. In the days that followed, Lulu underwent several surgeries, each one a step toward recovery. She endured the pain with the same quiet strength that had defined her life up until that point, making jokes and smiling even as her body healed. The beach where the attack had taken place stood eerily silent, a stark reminder of the predator that lurked just beneath the surface. Ellie and her friend Layla returned to the shore one night, finding the beach deserted, as if nature itself was reflecting the somber mood that had gripped them all. Though shark attacks are rare, reports of bull sharks in the area had surfaced in the weeks leading up to the incident. The Bay County Sheriff speculated that the presence of bait fish near the shore might have drawn the shark closer to the sandbar. While many shark bites on humans are believed to be cases of mistaken identity or curiosity, the attack on Lulu served as a chilling reminder of the unpredictability of nature's most dangerous predator. It was a cloudy day on the 23rd of June 2005 when the Webster family, Grant, Cherie, and their daughter Alicia, arrived at the island of Malakula, New Zealand aboard their yacht. The weather had turned dreary and a gloomy atmosphere hung over the island. They had come for a much-needed break, eager to spend time with their friends, the Morecambe family, who had joined them on the voyage. But the island greeted them with an unsettling quiet. The water, usually a source of joy and peace for the Websters, now seemed to hold an underlying tension. Alicia Webster, just 7 years old, loved the water. The ocean had always been her playground, and the rhythmic lapping of the waves against the shore had always calmed her. She was a seasoned swimmer, comfortable in the depths of the sea, and this time she couldn't wait to get in. As the yacht anchored near the shore, the children were quick to leap into the water, eager to explore the shoreline. But LePen Tillerson, a local teacher who had lived on the island for several years, saw Alicia from a distance and knew trouble could be waiting. LePen approached the family and offered a warning. He spoke of the sharks that frequented the waters attracted by the fishing boats in the area. The sharks, he explained, had learned to associate this region with easy meals, making it dangerous for those who ventured too far into the ocean. He advised the family to keep their children out of the water, suggesting that there were freshwater areas nearby that would be much safer. LePen's own children, he added, never swam in the ocean. The Websters, unfamiliar with the risks, dismissed his concern. They had seen local children playing in the water and didn't want to ruin their fun. They moved inland for lunch away from the beach. The time away seemed to ease their tension, but once the meal was finished, the pull of the ocean proved too great to resist. Despite LePen's repeated warnings, the family returned to the shore and let their daughter swim again. They convinced themselves he was exaggerating, that the water was safe. After all, local children were still playing in the shallows. How dangerous could it really be? As Alicia waded into the shallows, her parents watched with a sense of ease. She was a confident swimmer and they had raised her in the water. She called out to them, laughing, before announcing that she needed to pee. Without hesitation, she ventured further from the shore, wading past the gentle break of waves where the water deepened. Her parents, more preoccupied with the sight of local children quickly exiting the water, reassured her that it was fine to relieve herself in the ocean. They turned their attention back to the children on the shore, unaware that their carelessness would soon have devastating consequences. It happened so quickly, just a moment's lapse in attention was enough. The children's hurried retreat from the water hadn't registered with the parents' minds, and when they looked back at their daughter, Alicia was no longer where they had last seen her. Panic set in as they scanned the water, their eyes darting over the waves. Then a chilling scream shattered the quiet of the beach. Alicia burst from the water, blood pouring from a horrific wound in her leg. Her father, Grant, rushed forward, heart pounding as he scooped her from the water. She was barely conscious, her body trembling in his arms as he saw the extent of the damage. Her left leg had been severed at the thigh, the bite marks running along her entire side. Blood stained the water around them, turning the shoreline red. Grant's mind raced as he screamed for help. The family's frantic efforts to staunch the bleeding were in vain. The reality of the situation hit them all at once. The shark had already claimed its victim. The water was alive with the scent of blood, and the children, terrified, scrambled away from the shore. With Alicia in his arms, Grant made the split-second decision to take her back to the yacht. They loaded her into a dinghy, paddling toward the mainland with desperation fueling their every stroke. The trip seemed endless. The weight of their daughter's condition pressed down on them, but nothing could stop them from trying to save her. When they finally reached the shore, they flagged down a lorry and begged the driver to take them to the hospital. But it was too late. An hour later, Alicia was pronounced dead on arrival, her life slipping away long before they had reached help. Her parents were left in stunned disbelief, the full weight of their failure settling over them. They had not heeded the warning. They had believed, just for a moment, that they understood the ocean better than a local who had lived there for years. The attack on Alicia came without warning, leaving behind more questions than answers. What had driven the shark to target her? Some wondered if it was the blood from her wound that drew the predator close, while others speculated that the debated theory about human urine attracting sharks might have been a factor, though no conclusive evidence existed. Days after the tragedy, local canoeists reported a large tiger shark patrolling the waters near where Alicia had been attacked. Some even suggested a great white might have been involved, having been spotted just days before. However, with no definitive proof, the cause of the attack remained uncertain. The Websters returned home, their hearts shattered by the loss of their daughter. Alicia's memory, bright and full of life, remained with them, a stark contrast to the tragic and unexplained way she had died. It was a clear summer morning in Adelaide. The air cool enough to make you shiver for a moment, but the warmth of the day was already starting to settle in. Kai, just 15 years old, stood at the edge of the Southern Adelaide Surf Club, gazing out over the bay. His eyes still wide with the youthful energy of someone who had just come into his own as a surfer, followed the rhythmic dance of the waves. His love for the ocean ran deep, far deeper than any of the other sports he tried over the years, from soccer to basketball. Surfing was his true passion, his lifeblood. He had started early, joining the Micrograms Junior Surf Club at 7. His love for the sport was unquestionable, and by the time he was 10, he was already competing for SEView Road Board Riders, one of the oldest clubs in the country. His family, always supportive, was quick to load up the car for road trips to competitions. Their weekends were filled with the hum of the car on long drives, the sound of laughter, and the satisfaction of being near the water. But no journey, no competition would come to define Kai's life like the one he took on December 28, 2023. It was supposed to be a family holiday, a brief escape from their everyday lives. The York Peninsula, with its well-known surf spots, seemed like the perfect place for a break. The family arrived at Eel Beach with high hopes for a good session. The skies, however, were overcast, the clouds hanging low and heavy above the sea. Still, Kai wasn't about to back down. He'd surfed in worse conditions. The ocean was his domain, no matter the weather. The waves at Ethel's Ledge were known for being challenging, an ideal spot for a surfer of Kai's ability. But on this day, the conditions weren't great. Still, Kai paddled out with his father close behind him, determined to make the most of the opportunity. The water, cold and gray, seemed more ominous than usual, but Kai ignored the nagging feeling that had begun to creep in. Far beneath the surface, something else was stirring. The shark, a great white weighing in at over 700 kilograms, was hunting. It moved silently through the murky depths, its keen senses alert to the presence of prey. The shark was not hunting out of hunger, but out of instinct, an opportunistic feeder waiting for a moment to strike. Kai's father, older but still fit, was trailing behind as his son cut through the water. Kai was agile, carving through the waves with ease, while his father struggled to keep up. For him, these moments were about more than the sport. It was about the shared experience, the road trips with his son, the time spent together. Yet, as they surfed, they were unaware of the true danger lurking in the water. At 1:30 in the afternoon, Kai paddled past the breakers, ready for another wave. The shark, sensing the movement above, honed in on its target. With ruthless precision, it shot upward, its jaws gaping wide. The first strike was brutal. Kai was knocked off his board, and before he could react, the shark's teeth sank deep into his leg. The force of the attack pulled him under the surface. Kai's heart raced, his mind scrambling to understand what was happening. His father, having just caught a wave, turned back at the sound of his son's cry. His eyes locked onto the scene unfolding in the water. His son struggling, being dragged under by the enormous shark. The realization hit him like a punch to the gut. He couldn't reach him in time. His son, the one he had spent years training and growing alongside, was being torn apart by a creature from the deep. Kai fought with every ounce of strength he had, the pain in his leg excruciating as the shark tightened its grip. His father's voice reached him, urging him to swim to shore. The boy's eyes were wide with fear, but the blood loss was already starting to take its toll. The water around him turned crimson as the shark's grip severed an artery, draining Kai of the strength he needed to make it to safety. Tim Phillips, a local surfer perched on the cliffs above, watched the scene unfold. His heart raced as he saw the desperate struggle below. Without a second thought, he grabbed a board and dove into the water, paddling furiously toward the boy. The shark, its predatory instincts still sharp, circled Kai, waiting for him to weaken. Tim's thoughts were a blur as he reached the unconscious boy. The water was thick with the smell of blood, and every instinct told him to retreat. But Kai needed him. Just as Tim grabbed the boy and attempted to swim him to safety, the shark circled again. It was massive, its dark body looming beneath the water. Tim's pulse hammered in his chest, but he knew he had no choice. He had to get Kai back to shore. With the shark still nearby, he secured the boy onto the board and they made their way back to the beach. By the time they reached the shallows, others had arrived to help. But despite their efforts, despite the rush of emergency services, it was too late. Kai, still limp on the sand, had lost too much blood. The boy who had carved through waves with such ease, who had loved the ocean more than anything, had succumbed to his injuries. Kai was the third shark victim in Australian waters that year. The surfing community, stunned by the loss of such a young, promising talent, rallied around his family. The heartbreak was immeasurable. Kai's love for the sea, for surfing, had come at a cost. But those who knew him would never forget the way he lived, the way he embraced life with every wave he caught, every moment he shared with his family and friends. What he loved more than anything in the world, more than surfing, was his family. He had grown up surfing with his uncle and spent huge amounts of time with his younger brother, Jet. They had laughed together, played together, surfed together. It was the family road trips, the hours spent in the car traveling for competitions that his father cherished the most. Just being with his son, talking, sharing the ride. It was these moments that would now be haunted by the loss of his son. At his memorial service on Seaford Beach, surfers gathered in a solemn circle in the water, a silent tribute to the boy taken too soon. Kai's family, his father, mother, and younger brother, stood at the center, surrounded by those who loved him. They chanted his favorite words, "Just one more wave." It was a clear, sunny day at Lambert Beach, Queensland. From the cliff-top lookout, the ocean stretched endlessly, with the late afternoon sun casting a soft light over the water. For Margaret Hobbs and her fiancé, it felt like the perfect moment to spend some quiet time together as a newly engaged couple. But what they didn't realize was that their day was about to take an unexpected turn. The beaches of Queensland are famous for their crystal clear waters and massive swells that beckon surfers from around the world. But the oceans here are not as tranquil as they appear. Beneath the surface, there lurk over 100 species of sharks. From small, sharp-nosed sharks measuring only 2 feet long to the massive and ferocious tiger sharks, which can grow up to 20 feet long. Shark attacks are rare, but they happen, and Queensland has earned its place as one of the global leaders in shark attack statistics. On December 28, 1961, a young couple, Margaret Hobbs and her fiancé Hans Steffens, were spending their holiday at Lambert Beach. Margaret, just 18 years old, and Hans, 24, had recently become engaged and were celebrating the beginning of their new life together. Margaret, a trainee teacher, and Hans, a salesman, were filled with hope and excitement. The sun was warm, the water inviting, and their spirits were high as they enjoyed the simple joy of each other's company. They were wading in the shallow waters, no more than 3 feet deep, playfully splashing each other as they laughed. The day had been perfect, but it was about to take a horrific turn. As the sun began to dip, casting long shadows on the shore, the couple stood side by side just a few feet from the shoreline. Without warning, Hans felt a sharp pain shoot through his right hand. He barely had time to react before something enormous dragged him into the water. The ocean surged around him as he was pulled deeper, his vision clouded with pain and the rush of water. He looked down to see a massive 10-foot shark clamped around his arm. The creature was powerful, pulling him further into the depths of the bay. Hans struggled, his heart pounding as he fought against the jaws of the shark. With all his strength, he managed to wrench his arm free, blood pouring into the water. The pain was unbearable. He screamed, the wound in his arm leaving him in agony. Before he could catch his breath, the shark turned its attention to Margaret. In an instant, she was yanked beneath the surface, vanishing from Hans's view. The water muffled her screams as the shark tore into her, its grip strong and unyielding. Hans, desperate and fueled by a surge of adrenaline, rushed to help, diving back into the water. He reached for Margaret, pulling at the shark, his hands striking the creature as he tried to get it to release her. Despite his efforts, the shark held on tight, refusing to let go. Graham Jorgensen, a man on the beach, had seen the attack unfold. Without hesitation, he charged into the water, joining Hans in the struggle. Together, they beat the shark, trying to pry it off Margaret. The shark finally relented, releasing its grip, and the two men managed to drag her out of the water. But the danger wasn't over. The shark lingered nearby, watching the struggle, its primal instincts waiting for the next opportunity. Margaret was dragged onto the beach, blood seeping into the sand beneath her. Her body was torn, and the severity of her injuries became apparent. Her right arm had been savaged by the shark, the bone visible through the mangled flesh. Her left arm was entirely gone, consumed by the shark during the attack. Her right thigh was shredded, the skin barely hanging on. She lay there, cold and fading, knowing her time was running out. As onlookers gathered, the situation turned desperate. A nurse who was on the beach that day heard the commotion and rushed to help. She found Margaret in a state beyond any trauma she had expected to encounter on her day off. Without hesitation, the nurse began to apply tourniquets, wrapping them tightly around Margaret's wounds to slow the blood loss. Others on the beach called for an ambulance, but it was clear that every second counted. Margaret remained conscious, her body numb from the shock and pain. She tried to speak to Hans, the only person she could hold on to in those final moments. Her body was a wreck, but the nurse worked quickly, doing everything in her power to stabilize Margaret until the ambulance arrived. Finally, the paramedics reached the scene and rushed Margaret to the hospital in Mackay, where Hans was also taken. The couple was separated for surgery, both needing extreme medical intervention to survive. Hans's arm was too damaged to save, and it was amputated. Despite the loss of his arm, Hans's injuries were comparatively minor. Margaret, however, was not so lucky. Her right leg was amputated, and she had lost her left arm. The damage was too great. Margaret's condition worsened as the hours passed. Her blood loss was severe, and despite a nationwide call for blood donations, the hospital struggled to keep up with her needs. It was discovered that Margaret had a rare blood type, and despite the best efforts of the community, it wasn't enough. Margaret died on December 30th, 1961 at 6:55 p.m. The nation mourned the loss of the young woman whose life had been tragically cut short. The shark responsible for the attack was never found. While several boats set out from Lambert Beach in search of the creature, none of the sharks caught fit the description of the attacker. Despite this, the residents of Queensland began to take action, and by 1962, shark nets were installed across several beaches, including Southport and Kangaroo. The nets provided some protection, but even then, no system could guarantee that the oceans would be entirely safe. In the aftermath of the attack, the shark nets helped reduce the number of shark encounters, but the memory of that day remained etched in the minds of those who witnessed the horror. Margaret's tragic death had, in a strange way, saved many lives, as the attack led to the installation of safety measures that helped protect swimmers in the future. Yet, for those who knew her, no measure of safety could undo the tragedy they had witnessed. Though the species of shark remains unknown, the likely culprit was a tiger shark, known for its aggression and its tendency to attack humans unprovoked. Even with all the safety measures in place, the ocean remained a dangerous and unpredictable force, one that could change lives in an instant, as it had done for Margaret and Hans. It was December 2010 and the coastal city of Sharm el-Sheikh, Egypt was alive with tourists. Located at the tip of the Sinai Peninsula, it had long been known for its crystal clear waters, sandy beaches, and luxurious resorts. The Red Sea, teeming with vibrant coral reefs and exotic marine life, made it a paradise for swimmers and divers alike. What most visitors didn't know, however, was that this peaceful getaway was about to become the epicenter of a terrifying shark attack spree. For Olga Martchenko, a 48-year-old from Russia, this trip was an opportunity to share the beauty of Egypt with her daughter Yena. Together, they had spent days exploring the cultural wonders of the city, but it was the Red Sea that captivated them the most. Each morning they would swim in its warm, inviting waters, marveling at the schools of colorful fish and the strange alien world beneath the surface. They had planned to swim one last time before finding a place for lunch, but that would be the last peaceful moment of their holiday. Olga floated on her back, gazing up at the bright blue sky, the rhythm of the water moving gently beneath her. The cool waves lapped against her skin, and for a moment it seemed as though nothing could go wrong. Her left arm extended out, stretching leisurely across the water. Nearby, her daughter played on the jetty, watching her mother with a carefree smile. But something wasn't right. A strange sensation tickled her fingers, rough like sandpaper. She tried to brush it away, thinking it was a rock or some floating debris. But it wasn't as rough as a rock, it was more leathery. Before she could react, the calm of the water shattered. A sudden sharp pain surged through her arm as something massive latched onto it. Panic gripped her heart as she screamed, her voice swallowed by the sea. She could hardly comprehend what was happening when she saw the beast that had attacked her. A shark, its jaws clamped tightly around her arm. Its teeth sank into her flesh, dragging her under the surface. In an instant, she tried to fight, but the shark had already begun to tear into her. The pain was blinding, but her only thought was to escape. She kicked wildly, trying to push herself away from the beast, but it was too late. The shark's grip tightened, and with a sickening jerk, it tore her arm off. She couldn't believe it. One moment she was floating in paradise, and the next she was fighting for her life. Desperate, Olga turned to see if her daughter was safe. Through the haze of pain, she saw Yenna on the jetty looking out toward her. She screamed for help, hoping that Yenna had seen the attack and could get help. Blood streamed from her arm, turning the water around her into a crimson pool. Her frantic cries caught the attention of nearby lifeguards, who immediately began to react. Still, the shark continued its relentless assault. Every time Olga thought she might be free, the shark would strike again, forcing her down into the depths before dragging her back to the surface with renewed hunger. Olga pushed herself forward with every ounce of strength she could muster, her legs burning with effort as she swam desperately toward the jetty. The pain was excruciating, but stopping was not an option. The shark circled relentless, its eyes cold and predatory. Finally, she reached the jetty and lifeguards pulled her from the water, but the shark wasn't finished. It circled just beyond, waiting. Olga was whisked away to safety, but the ordeal wasn't over. As she was dragged onto the jetty, lifeguards wrapped her severed arm in pressure bandages, trying to slow the blood loss. They could hear screams from the other side of the beach, but they didn't know what was happening there. At that very moment, Ludmila Stolyarova, a 70-year-old woman from Russia, was experiencing the same nightmare. Ludmila had been enjoying the last few days of her holiday with her husband Vladimir. The warm sun and the gentle waves seemed like the perfect antidote for the cold winters back home in Russia. As the afternoon wore on, Ludmila suggested they take one final swim before heading back to their hotel. Vladimir, engrossed in his book, declined, urging her to go alone. She agreed and waded into the water, blissfully unaware that danger was lurking. Meanwhile, not far from her, a local dive instructor named Hassan Ali was guiding a new client through the basics of diving. As they descended to explore the underwater world, Hassan noticed something unusual. A white-tipped shark about 10 feet long was circling them. Its movements were erratic, as though it was uncertain, perhaps being threatened. Hassan tried to make himself appear larger, and he gestured for his client to move away slowly. But the shark had already decided it was time to hunt. In one terrifying burst, the shark darted toward the surface, bypassing Hassan and his client, heading straight for Ludmila. Hassan watched in horror as the shark closed in on the elderly woman, sinking its teeth into her leg and pulling her beneath the surface. Helpless, Hassan could only watch as the shark savaged Ludmila. He saw her blood cloud the water, the crimson stain spreading rapidly as the shark tore at her flesh. It was an unrelenting assault. Her screams were muffled beneath the waves, and Hassan was shocked by the brutal scene. He quickly surfaced and alerted everyone on the beach, but by then, the damage had been done. Olga's attack had already sent people scrambling to safety. Hassan dove back into the water, reaching Ludmila as quickly as he could. The shark had already torn her left foot clean off. As he tried to help, the shark made another strike, this time latching onto her right arm. But Ludmila, driven by instinct, yanked her arm away, tearing the skin in the process, exposing the bone. The shark, unfazed, continued its assault until finally, with the help of lifeguards, they managed to pull her to safety. Ludmila, bloodied and disoriented, was laid beside Olga on the beach, both women now victims of the same predator. The beach was in chaos. Hassan, frantic, urged everyone to evacuate the water. Ambulances arrived and both women were rushed to a nearby hospital. The medical team worked frantically to stop the bleeding and stabilize their conditions. Olga's injuries were horrific. Her hand had been severed below the elbow and a large chunk had been torn from her buttocks, exposing her spinal cord. She was given 6 units of blood before being sent to intensive care. Ludmila fared no better. Her left foot was gone, and the shark had torn her arm to shreds. Doctors managed to stabilize her, but it was clear that both women had narrowly escaped death. As they were airlifted to Moscow for further treatment, the shock of their horrifying ordeal rippled through Sharm el-Sheikh. It was confirmed that the same white-tip shark had attacked both Olga and Ludmila. For weeks, the beaches were closed while authorities searched for the shark, but it was never caught. Months later, divers reported sighting it again, and disturbingly, videos emerged of a dive master hand-feeding the very shark responsible for the attacks, a practice that was swiftly banned. It was a bright, clear morning at Port Beach, a stretch of pristine sand and sparkling water along Perth's coastline. The sun was already warming the sands, promising another day of perfect weather. The water shimmered with golden light as waves rolled lazily onto the shore, where swimmers, surfers, and sunbathers enjoyed the early hours. For Paul Milichip, this was another day of routine. Another mile-long swim along the coastline he and his wife had come to call home. Paul was a 57-year-old British expat who had built a life in Australia with his wife. Known for his remarkable fitness, Paul had competed in 6 Ironman competitions. These grueling events involved a 2.4-mile swim, a 112-mile bike ride, and a marathon run. He and his wife embraced Perth's outdoor lifestyle, regularly running, cycling, and swimming along its coastline. That morning, Paul and his wife arrived at Port Beach as they often did. She briefly joined him in the water, but quickly retreated, finding the cold too biting. Paul, undeterred, continued swimming, accustomed to the chill and driven by his disciplined nature. While his wife dried off on shore, Paul swam steadily, his practiced strokes cutting through the water. Unbeknownst to him, a predator lurked beneath the surface. A tiger shark measuring approximately 10 feet patrolled the shallows. The warmer waters and abundance of prey had drawn it closer to shore. This was an opportunistic hunter, capable of taking down dolphins and seals. Millions of years of evolution had made it one of the ocean's most efficient predators, and Paul's silhouette on the surface appeared to it as potential prey. The attack was sudden and devastating. The shark surged upward with tremendous force, its movements precise and instinctual. Paul likely didn't even see it coming. Witnesses later described the shark's sheer size, its dark gray back arching out of the water before dragging Paul beneath the waves. Nearby, 4 teenage boys sat fishing in a small dinghy. Their carefree morning was shattered when they saw the attack unfold just feet from their boat. They watched in horror as the shark broke the surface, its dorsal fin and tail cutting through the water before disappearing with Paul in its jaws. The boys froze momentarily, their laughter replaced by shock and fear. On shore, Paul's wife emerged from the dressing room, scanning the water for his familiar strokes. Instead, she saw the teenagers frantically shouting and waving from their boat. It took a moment for her to grasp what they were saying. A shark attack. Panic spread across the beach as swimmers and surfers rushed to the rocks, scrambling to get out of the water. The teenagers, shaken but quick to act, motored along the shoreline, warning others to get to safety. One of them used his phone to call emergency services while their small boat hovered near the attack site. They were within feet of the shark and could see the massive distance between its dorsal fin and tail, a chilling reminder of its size and power. Emergency crews responded swiftly. A rescue helicopter diverted from a patrol 50 miles away, arriving to assist in the search. 5 water police and sea rescue boats joined the effort, along with lifeguards from a nearby beach. The vastness of the ocean, however, proved relentless. Hours of searching yielded only a single clue: Paul's goggles floating near the site of the attack. After 24 hours, the search was called off. Paul's wife had to deliver the heartbreaking news to their family overseas. Paul, a father of 2 grown children, had vanished in the waters he loved. His wife later thanked the boys in the dinghy for their courage. Though they couldn't save Paul, their quick actions may have prevented further tragedy by alerting others to the danger. The news of the attack spread quickly, leaving a deep impact on the local community. It was the 3rd fatal shark attack in Australian waters that year. Port Beach was closed for the weekend, its sands marked with caution tape and warning signs. By Monday, the beach reopened, though many swimmers stayed away, haunted by the memory of what had happened. The Port Beach Polar Bears, a local swimming group, faced a difficult decision. Some members returned to the water, determined not to let fear keep them away. Others, however, decided to stay on shore, unable to shake the unease brought by the tragedy. Days later, another shark sighting was reported near Port Beach, a shadow circling just 300 feet from shore. A surf life-saving helicopter was dispatched to search the area, but found no trace of the predator. The teenagers who witnessed the attack were later honored with bravery awards for their quick thinking and actions that morning. These awards, given by local authorities, recognize their extraordinary courage during such a traumatic event. Despite the recognition, the boys would forever carry the memory of what they had seen: the shark's immense body, its predatory precision, and the finality of its attack. For Paul's wife, the loss was immeasurable, yet she found some solace in knowing that he had died doing what he loved, immersed in the ocean, a place of freedom and peace for him. It was a bright and sunny day on September 6, 2022, when Carolyn Deposito, along with her family, disembarked from the Royal Caribbean cruise ship Harmony of the Seas at Nassau, Bahamas. The group had been eagerly anticipating this snorkeling excursion for weeks, excited to explore the crystal clear waters off Rose Island. However, what they didn't know was that there was a hidden danger lurking beneath the surface. Carolyn, 58 years old, was a beloved member of her community in Erie, Pennsylvania. Known for her kindness and the warmth she spread among family, friends, and colleagues, she was a central figure at Gannon University where she worked. She and her family had been looking forward to this long-awaited vacation for months, and their excitement had been building since they first boarded the cruise ship at Port Canaveral, Florida. It was a chance to unwind, reconnect, and create new memories together. Little did they know this dream holiday would end in heartbreak. The Harmony of the Seas was one of the largest cruise ships in the world, with its towering water slides, fine dining, zip lines, and breathtaking ocean views. Its passengers could enjoy everything from swimming pools to world-class entertainment. For Caroline and her family, it was the perfect way to experience the Caribbean. On the morning of September 6th, the ship docked just off Nassau, the capital of the Bahamas. The turquoise waters and white sandy beaches promised an unforgettable day of adventure. At around noon, Carolyn and her family boarded a smaller boat, excited for the snorkeling adventure they had booked weeks earlier. Their destination was Rose Island, known for its beautiful coral reefs and vibrant marine life. However, Rose Island also had a darker reputation, one that Carolyn and her family were unaware of. Just 3 years earlier, in 2019, a tragic shark attack had taken place in nearly the same spot. A young American tourist, Jordan Lindsay, was killed by a feeding frenzy of 3 tiger sharks while snorkeling in the area. The sharks attacked Jordan relentlessly, stripping her of an arm and fatally injuring her before she was rescued. Her mother, who had witnessed the horrific scene, was helpless to save her daughter. As the family arrived at Rose Island, the warm sun glinted off the calm water. It was a beautiful day, the kind of day tourists dream about. Carolyn and her family prepared for the water, pulling on their masks and snorkels. The crystal clear sea beckoned them, and they eagerly entered the water, floating just above the vibrant coral reef. Below the surface, the reef stretched out in every direction, teeming with life. Fish darted in and out of the coral, and sea urchins clung to the rocks. Carolyn dipped her head underwater, mesmerized by the breathtaking underwater world. It was a serene moment, one that would soon turn deadly. Unbeknownst to Carolyn, a bull shark was prowling the area. These sharks, known for their aggression and territorial behavior, are considered one of the most dangerous species in the world. Bull sharks frequent coastal waters like those in the Bahamas, preying on smaller fish and occasionally larger animals. Naturally inquisitive, they often bite humans to determine if they're a suitable source of food. Carolyn, focused on the reef below, had no idea she was about to become the shark's next target. The bull shark had spotted Carolyn, her body silhouetted against the bright sunlight as she floated near the surface. The shark, sensing an opportunity, moved in quickly from below. With a sudden burst of speed, it struck with incredible force, slamming into Carolyn. The impact knocked her head back out of the water, and its powerful jaws clamped down on her torso. The pain was immediate and excruciating. Carolyn's scream shattered the peaceful surroundings. Her family, snorkeling nearby, turned in horror at the commotion. Allison, her daughter, was the first to react, swimming toward Carolyn as the water around her churned and turned red. The shark, its body thrashing violently, released Carolyn after a moment. Struggling to stay afloat, Carolyn gasped for air, her body weakened by the trauma to her left side. The family rushed to her aid, pulling her away from the now murky water as quickly as they could. Together, they managed to lift her onto a nearby tour boat. Once aboard, they worked desperately to apply pressure to her wounds, tearing off pieces of their clothing to try to stem the bleeding. Despite their frantic efforts, it was clear that the bite to her torso was severe and she had already lost a significant amount of blood. The boat's crew called for emergency assistance as they sped toward the nearest shore, Fort Montague on New Providence Island, praying they would make it in time. The family clung to hope, desperately trying to save Carolyn, even as the severity of her injuries became painfully clear. During the boat ride, Carolyn's family fought to keep her alive. Her daughter Allison attempted to resuscitate her, but Carolyn's condition continued to worsen. By the time the boat reached Fort Montague, Carolyn had gone unconscious. The family was devastated when she was pronounced dead upon arrival. Despite the crew's best effort to revive her, the attack had taken everything from them in a matter of minutes. The shark attack in the Bahamas sent shockwaves through the family, who had been so full of excitement just hours before. What was meant to be a joyful family adventure turned into an unimaginable tragedy. Carolyn, known for her warmth and generosity, was suddenly gone, leaving behind a grieving family who would never be the same. It was a clear, sunny day when Jeffrey Brazier steered the Matrix, an 80-foot catamaran, into the turquoise waters off Pelican Island. On board were 12 passengers, eager to experience the untouched beauty of Australia's western coastline. For Jeffrey, this day marked another step toward realizing his dream of making a living from the ocean, a passion he had held since childhood. He had been introduced to the sea before he could walk, spending his early years on boats with his parents. Growing up, his love for surfing, diving, and sailing deepened, but he wasn't sure how to turn it into a career. When Matrix Ocean Adventures hired him as a first mate, it felt like fate. Recently, the original skipper had stepped down, and Jeffrey was offered the chance to take the helm for the Matrix's maiden voyage. He accepted the challenge with quiet pride, determined to prove himself. The Matrix was a luxury catamaran, 80 feet long with 6 private cabins, a spacious deck, and modern amenities. The 13-day journey began in Perth, following the rugged coastline all the way to Broome. Along the way, the passengers enjoyed secluded bays, snorkeling in crystal-clear waters, and breathtaking scenery that Jeffrey knew well. On this day, they had reached the southeast corner of Pelican Island, a spot known as Wreck Point. It was early afternoon and the group had just finished lunch. Jeffrey carefully maneuvered the catamaran into position and dropped anchor. The Abrolhos Islands, famous for their vibrant coral reefs and marine life, lay beneath the water's surface. Parrotfish, wrasses, and groupers darted through the corals, while sea turtles grazed lazily. The drop-off, where the shallow reef gave way to the deep blue, was a favorite snorkeling spot. Jeffrey handed out masks and snorkels, explaining the underwater wonders. The passengers, eager and excited, prepared to enter the water. Jeffrey joined them, lowering himself into the warm, clear sea. As Jeffrey swam, the underwater world unfolded before him. Fish shimmered in the sunlight, weaving through vibrant coral formations. Sea anemones swayed gently, their tentacles dancing with the rhythm of the ocean. Near the edge of the drop-off, Jeffrey spotted a large sea turtle grazing on the coral. He waved to Rod Plug, one of the passengers nearby, signaling for him to take a closer look. Rod started toward Jeffrey but noticed water leaking into his mask. He stopped to adjust it, using a standard diver's hand signal to indicate he was heading back to the boat. Jeffrey glanced up briefly and saw the gesture, acknowledging it with a quick wave before turning his focus back to the reef, unaware of the dark shadow rising from the depths below. As Rod swam toward the Matrix, he tightened his mask, adjusting it against his face. The peaceful silence of the ocean surrounded him, until a sudden splash behind him shattered the stillness. Startled, he turned just in time to see the water churn violently. In an instant, a massive shark, jaws wide open, surged upward and slammed into Jeffrey. The shark was estimated to be around 20 feet long. Eyewitnesses later described it as having a dark back and pale underside with a dorsal fin about 3 feet high. With incredible force, the shark's bite severed Jeffrey's body in two. Blood spread through the water as the shark thrashed its head from side to side, holding onto Jeffrey. The snorkelers nearby froze, watching the chaos unfold. Panic swept through them as they swam desperately toward the catamaran. Their adrenaline surged, pushing them forward. Reaching the ladder, they scrambled aboard, breathless and in shock, trembling with fear. The crew quickly accounted for everyone else. No one else had been injured, but the passengers were in shock. From the deck, they could see the dark silhouette of the shark below the surface, carrying away half of Jeffrey's body. It moved with eerie calm, disappearing into the depths. Minutes later, the shark reappeared. Its snout and eyes broke the surface near Jeffrey's remains. It moved slowly, opening its jaws once more, and seized the rest of Jeffrey's body. Then, with a swirl of water, it vanished, leaving only silence behind. The crew radioed authorities, reporting the attack and requesting help. Emergency services advised them to return to Geraldton immediately. The Matrix motored toward the mainland, its passengers silent and pale. Word of the incident spread quickly, and local fishermen and tourists were warned to stay out of the water. Police and fisheries officers launched a search for the shark, hoping to recover Jeffrey's remains for a coroner's report. Helicopters and patrol boats circled the wreck point for hours, but the strong currents carried away any trace of the tragedy. By sunset, the search was called off. Rory McCall, a shark researcher, explained that there was no clear reason for the shark's appearance. There had been no fishing nearby, and the snorkelers hadn't been chumming in the water. However, the proximity to the continental shelf where deep-water predators often hunt made shark encounters possible. Great whites are known to traverse the western coast of Australia, though sightings near coral reefs are rare. Jeffrey's death shocked the tight-knit maritime community. Friends and colleagues remembered him as a man whose love for the ocean was matched by his kindness and generosity. His father described him as a carefree and dedicated young man who had turned his passion into a career. The passengers and crew of the Matrix struggled to process the tragedy. haunted by the memory of the once peaceful waters turning red. While shark attacks in Australian waters are rare, this event was a stark reminder that the ocean is wild and unpredictable. For Jeffrey Brazier, the sea that had been his sanctuary became, in an instant, the source of his untimely end. In the days that followed, Jeffrey's family received countless messages of sympathy. His father recalled how many friends Jeffrey had made, noting his ability to connect with everyone he met. The attack had left a deep wound in the community. No one had expected such a tragedy in such a beautiful, serene place. It was a warm, sunny Saturday morning, December 2nd, 2023. Melake Beach in Yales, western Mexico was alive with activity. Families gathered along the golden sands, and the calm waters hosted a swimming race that drew spectators and competitors alike. Among the visitors was Maria Fernandez Martinez, a 26-year-old mother accompanied by her 5-year-old daughter. Maria recently graduated with a degree in marine biology from the University of Guadalajara, had always loved the ocean. The beach had been her sanctuary since childhood, and she was now sharing that love with her daughter. It was a serene day filled with warmth and motherly love. But beneath the calm surface of the water, an unseen predator lurked, silently waiting for its moment to strike. As Maria and her daughter stepped onto the sand, they marveled at the pristine shoreline. The bay was sheltered by rugged lava outcrops, and the waters shimmered invitingly under the morning sun. After undressing down to their swimming suits, they waded into the shallows, giggling as they splashed each other and enjoyed the refreshing embrace of the sea. The excitement of the swimming race nearby added to the lively atmosphere, with officials' voices echoing over loudspeakers and spectators cheering on the participants. Everything seemed perfect, at least in the beginning. After a while, Maria pointed to a floating platform about 80 feet from the shore. The platform was popular with families and often served as a gathering spot for children to leap into the water. That morning, it was deserted, making it the perfect spot for Maria and her daughter to enjoy some quiet fun. They started swimming toward the platform, laughing as they moved through the warm, crystal-clear water. Unbeknownst to them, a 15-foot great white shark had entered the area, attracted by the commotion in the water. Renowned for their stealth and deadly precision, these apex predators can attack with terrifying speed. This one glided silently beneath the waves, honing in on its prey. The beachgoers, engrossed in the excitement of the swimming match and their own enjoyment, remained blissfully unaware of the lurking danger. As Maria and her daughter neared the platform, the great white struck suddenly, its powerful jaws clamping down on Maria's leg. She screamed in alarm, startling her daughter, who turned to see blood clouding the water around her mother. Maria thrashed desperately, trying to free herself as the predator's jaws clamped down with crushing force, tearing into her leg. The immense pain surged through her body, but her focus remained on protecting her daughter. She waved her daughter toward the platform, shouting for her to swim. The young girl hesitated, her face etched with fear, before obeying her mother's command and paddling toward safety on the platform. Maria fought fiercely, striking at the creature's head and kicking it with her free leg. She could feel its rough skin and sharp teeth cutting deeper. The water churned red as Maria's strength waned. Nearby, her daughter stood frozen on the floating platform, screaming in terror as the horrifying scene unfolded before her eyes. Just as abruptly as the attack began, the great white released Maria. In agony and barely able to move, Maria began struggling toward the shore. On the beach, bystanders noticed the commotion and rushed into the shallows. At first, some mistook Maria's frantic splashing for playful activity, but the sight of blood quickly erased any doubt. As she struggled toward the shore, a group of rescuers waded out to her, grabbing her arms and pulling her onto the sand. The scene that met them was horrifying. Maria's right leg was gone, severed below the hip. Blood poured from the wound, staining the golden sand crimson. Bystanders scrambled to help, tying a makeshift tourniquet around her leg to stem the bleeding. Paramedics arrived minutes later, but Maria had already lost consciousness. Despite their best efforts, the young mother could not be revived. The bite wounds combined with severe blood loss had claimed her life. Her daughter, safe and still on the floating platform, was quickly brought to shore by the lifeguards. Shaking and in shock, she was comforted by bystanders while arrangements were made to reunite her with her family. It was later, in the safety of familiar surroundings, that she learned the heartbreaking news: her mother had passed away. The devastation hit her hard, a loss that would stay with her for the rest of her life. Maria's final moments had been spent ensuring her daughter's safety, a true testament to her love and courage. In the days following the attack, flowers and tributes were placed on the beach where Maria lost her life. Strangers and friends alike mourn the loss of a vibrant young woman who has sacrificed everything for her daughter. It was a calm December morning in 2014 when 17-year-old fisherman Jay Muscat and his friend Matt Pella set out for a day of spearfishing near Shane's Beach in Western Australia's White Chinnicup National Park. The shoreline, dotted with tourists enjoying the pristine beaches, seemed peaceful. Yet beneath the clear waters, a deadly predator lurked, unaware of the danger it posed. Known for its crystal clear waters and soft white sands, the beach attracted visitors eager to escape into nature. Few realized that beneath the calm surface, a silent threat awaited its next victim. Jay and Matt had spent the morning diving in the clear waters, each trying to outdo the other with their spearfishing skills. Both experienced divers and members of the West Australia Undersea Diving Group, they were familiar with the area's marine life, including the bronze whaler shark. While the bronze whaler is a shark species known to be curious and occasionally aggressive, it's generally not considered a serious threat to skilled divers. That knowledge made Jay and Matt feel confident. They were prepared to handle encounters with this relatively common shark. What they didn't know, however, was that a much more dangerous predator, a massive 15-foot great white shark, had been spotted nearby just an hour earlier. The day began like any other. The water was cool and the teenagers quickly entered the ocean about 40 feet from shore, their eyes scanning for fish. For 20 minutes they swam and dived, unaware that only 2 days before a great white shark had been seen in the area. Even more ominously, the same shark had been circling nearby just before their arrival, searching for prey. The teenagers, the perfect size for the predator, had unknowingly become its next target. It wasn't until the attack happened that they realized the danger they were in. Matt was the first to feel it. A tremendous force slammed into him, pushing him off course. At first, he thought he had been struck by a boat, but when he surfaced, the terrifying truth became clear. The shark had pushed him aside as it attacked Jay. The massive predator's jaws were locked onto Jay's leg, pulling him under. The water turned a horrifying shade of red as Jay fought to free himself, blood streaming from his leg where the shark's teeth had torn into him, the water now thick with panic and fear. Matt froze, unable to comprehend the magnitude of the attack. Jay, his friend, was slowly losing consciousness from the blood loss. As the shark continued its assault, Matt could do nothing but watch in horror as the boy he had grown up with fought for his life. But his struggles only grew weaker, and within moments the battle stopped. Jay's body went limp as the shark tore into his leg, and then the predator released its grip, satisfied with its kill. But the shark wasn't finished. With its first victim dispatched, the great white turned toward Matt. The bloodied water swirled around them as Matt's mind raced. He had moments, maybe seconds, to act. Holding his spear gun tightly, Matt took a deep breath and aimed. His heart pounded in his chest as he recalled the advice he had received about defending against shark attacks. He focused on the creature's most vulnerable spot, the nostrils. Without hesitation, he fired the spear gun, and the harpoon sank into the shark's mouth. The shark recoiled in pain, thrashing violently in the water, giving Matt a brief moment to escape. Knowing his life was on the line, he swam as fast as he could toward a set of rocks about 30 meters away. His heart raced in his chest and his mind screamed at him, trying to keep moving. He could hear the shark still thrashing behind him, but he didn't dare to look. Every stroke felt like the last, but he pushed on, refusing to stop. As he neared the rocks, Matt stole a glance over his shoulder. The shark was still thrashing, but it seemed to be struggling, its movements more erratic now. Blood spilled from the wound where the spear had struck, and for a fleeting moment, Matt dared to hope that the animal was weakening. He reached the rocks and pulled himself out of the water, gasping for air. Though he was safe for now, his relief was short-lived. He glanced back at the water and saw Jay's lifeless body floating, still surrounded by the bloodied waters where the shark had once been. The horror of what had just happened washed over him, and Matt knew there was nothing he could have done. His friend was gone, killed by the very predator they had both swum alongside that morning. Unable to stay in the water any longer, Matt began to search for help. His eyes scanned the horizon until he spotted a passing fishing boat. Desperate, he flagged them down, and the fishermen immediately came to his aid, horrified by his story. They quickly made their way to the spot where Jay's body had been left in the water. They knew they had to retrieve him, but they couldn't do so without making sure the shark wasn't still lurking nearby. They approached cautiously, scanning the waters for any sign of danger. After a tense few moments, they pulled Jay's body from the water. The extent of the damage was brutal. The shark's powerful jaws had torn through Jay's legs, severing a major artery. The blood loss was catastrophic, and it was likely that Jay had gone into shock before he even lost consciousness. The teenager's dreams of becoming a commercial fisherman were cruelly cut short that day, and the family who awaited his return would never see him again. After returning Jay's body to shore, a search for the shark began. The beach was immediately closed for safety reasons, and the Department of Fisheries began an extensive manhunt for the predator. They dropped drum lines in an attempt to catch it, and patrols were set up in hopes of locating the shark. Authorities believed that the shark would still have the spear lodged in its mouth, a clear indication that it was the same animal responsible for the attack. Weeks passed, but the shark was never seen again. Speculation ran rampant across Australia, with some believing the shark had succumbed to its injuries and sunk to the bottom of the ocean, while others feared it had become a meal for another predator. The hunt for the great white ultimately ended in mystery, but one thing was certain: the attack had been a tragedy for both the victim and the animal involved. It was September 26, 2024, and Colleen Monfort, a 68-year-old grandmother and seasoned diver from the United States, was embarking on one of the last planned dives of her 7-week adventure across Indonesia. Colleen's love for diving had spanned decades, a passion she had shared with her husband Mike since their high school days. The two had met as teenagers, drawn together by their mutual love for nature and adventure. Over the years, they had not only explored the world's oceans together, but also owned a successful dive shop, where they shared their passion with others. This trip to Indonesia, with its rich marine biodiversity and world-renowned dive sites, was a dream come true for them both, an opportunity to relive their most cherished memories beneath the surface. That morning, the group of 6 divers who had grown close over the trip shared a cheerful breakfast. Laughter filled the air, and there was a deep sense of connection between them all. As they suited up for the day's dive, the excitement was palpable. The group had bonded over the past several weeks, and the familiarity between them fostered an easygoing, joyful atmosphere. As Colleen and her group descended to a depth of 25 feet, the waters surrounding Pulau Riong, part of the breathtaking Alor archipelago, promised vibrant coral reefs and rare marine life, a diver's paradise. For Colleen, each dive was a chance to reconnect with the sense of wonder she'd felt since her early teenage years. Confident and experienced, she wasn't easily frightened by the ocean. Yet beneath the surface of these beautiful waters there lurked hidden dangers, powerful currents and marine predators like tiger sharks that thrived in the warmth. The dive started with Colleen savoring every moment, knowing this was one of her last dives on this trip. She took in the vibrant underwater world, watching a graceful manta ray glide effortlessly through the coral reefs. The calm waters and serene surroundings made it feel like a perfect final adventure beneath the surface. But after about 30 minutes, the mood of the ocean began to shift. The once gentle currents turned fierce, swirling unpredictably. As the group tried to ascend to safer depths, the currents intensified, making it difficult to stay together. Colleen in particular felt the force pulling her away. She struggled to keep close to her husband Mike, but the ocean's grip was too strong. She waved her arms frantically, trying to signal her friends, but the churning water made it hard to be seen. Mike, just feet away, reached out desperately, but Colleen was already being dragged farther from him. Her shouts for help were muffled by the water, vanishing into the vast blue. Mike and the others did their best to fight the current, but within moments, Colleen was gone, pulled beyond their reach. The ocean, indifferent to their efforts, swallowed her whole. Desperation set in as the group frantically searched, their hearts racing. The dive guide quickly signaled for everyone to resurface, knowing the current was too strong to fight. When they emerged, gasping for air, a heavy dread settled over them. Mike's heart pounded as he scanned the water in every direction, calling Colleen's name, but there was no sign of her. The once beautiful waves now felt ominous, crashing violently against the shore. Hours of desperate searching followed, with boats dispatched and local authorities joining the effort. But as the strong currents carried Colleen far beyond reach, hope began to fade. The vast ocean, indifferent and unforgiving, seemed to swallow any trace of her, leaving only the haunting sound of the waves behind. An exhaustive 8-day search unfolded, with the coastline and waters scoured for any sign of Colleen. But the days stretched on and the ocean offered no clues. On October 3rd, with sea conditions worsening, the search was called off, and a heavy silence fell over the group. But 3 days later, on October 6th, the story took a grim turn. A fisherman off the coast of East Timor encountered a tiger shark in distress. Believing it had swallowed debris or fishing nets, the fisherman brought the shark aboard. Inside the shark's stomach, he found large human remains, pieces of a black wetsuit, and diving gear. Authorities quickly confirmed that these were Colleen's remains. Colleen's last moments remain a mystery, with only the grim discovery of her remains inside the shark offering any answers. Her friends and family, especially her husband Mike, were devastated by the loss. Left alone, Mike was forced to confront the painful reality that he would never again share an adventure with his fearless partner. In the sea, the moment of danger can arrive without warning. It was June 14, 1959. The morning sky over La Jolla Cove was a patchwork of clouds, gray and heavy, with the occasional break of sunlight shimmering on the water's surface. Robert Pamperin stood by his kitchen window, studying the horizon. The weather was less than ideal. The ocean reflected the dull sky above, but Robert and his friend Gerald had been planning this trip for weeks. Nothing short of a storm would deter them. The plan was straightforward: hunt for abalone off Alligator Head. Abalones were prized for their tender flesh and lustrous shells, fetching high prices in markets and restaurants. These large mollusks, native to cold waters along the Pacific coast of North America, were a delicacy. Harvesting them wasn't easy. Abalones clung tightly to rocks and preferred hiding in dark crevices during the day. Robert and Gerald knew the challenges, but they hoped their efforts would lead to a worthwhile haul. By mid-afternoon, Robert and Gerald, accompanied by their girlfriends, arrived at La Jolla Cove. The beach, as always, was busy with families and swimmers. The girlfriends found a small patch of sand near the rocky tide pools where Robert and Gerald began readying their gear. Robert carried blue swim fins, a black mask, gloves, and an abalone iron with a yellow handle. Attached to an inner tube, a burlap sack would hold their catch. The two men inspected their equipment with the precision born of habit. Freediving required minimal gear but demanded stamina and skill. Robert knew the risks well. Any experienced diver did. But the waters near La Jolla Cove had a reputation for safety. There had never been a fatal shark attack in the area, and the allure of the hunt outweighed any lurking concerns. By 5 p.m., with the tide beginning to rise, Robert and Gerald waded into the water near Alligator Head. The cool waves broke against their legs as they adjusted their masks and dove below the surface. Visibility was poor, no more than 20 feet, and the muted light gave the rocky seabed a shadowy cast. They moved methodically, diving and surfacing in turn, searching for abalones clinging to rocks. Each dive brought up more shells, their sacks growing heavier with the rewards of their labor. Unbeknownst to them, the water had become a perfect hunting ground, not just for the two friends, but for something far more dangerous. Earlier that day, divers had speared yellowtail fish nearby, leaving vibrations and traces of blood that could attract predators. A U.S. Navy sailor had also suffered a deep laceration on the rocks, his blood spilling into the water. Adding to the danger, a dead whale carcass had washed ashore less than 3,300 feet away the night before. Its fluids, carried by currents, created a scent trail that could lure large sharks from far away. The swell began to push the two men apart. They drifted farther with each dive until a gap of 30 to 50 feet separated them. Neither thought much of it. Both were confident swimmers and their focus remained on the hunt. It happened without warning. Beneath Robert, a dark outline of a great white shark emerged from the depths. At over 20 feet long, it was an anomaly for these waters, drawn by the scent and vibrations of the day's earlier activity. The shark surged upward, jaws wide, striking Robert with a force that churned the water red. Robert's scream pierced the air, a single desperate cry that startled Gerald. He turned in time to see his friend lifted out of the water, the shark clamped around his lower body. At first, Gerald thought it might be a cramp or a rogue wave, but the crimson stain spreading through the water told a more horrifying story. Gerald swam toward the commotion, his mind struggling to process the scene. Robert thrashed, his arms flailing as he tried to free himself. The shark shook its massive head, tearing deeper into its prey. Gerald dove beneath the surface, hoping to help, but the predator's size and power were overwhelming. It was no use. The shark dragged Robert into deeper waters, leaving only a spreading stain of blood in its wake. Panic overtook Gerald. He surfaced, gasping for air, and swam frantically toward the shore. His shouts drew the attention of lifeguards, who quickly organized a search. 10 experienced divers entered the water, combing the area for any sign of Robert, but found nothing. On the beach, their girlfriends stood in total shock, devastated by what was happening. As night fell, the search was called off, and the ocean remained silent about what had transpired beneath its surface. The next day, a swim fin washed ashore, its edges marked by jagged tears. The initials RP were carved into the rubber, a grim confirmation of Robert's fate. Witnesses, including a man perched on a nearby rock, corroborated Gerald's account. A great white shark had attacked Robert. Yet, some in the community clung to the notion of a killer whale, unwilling to believe such a predator could lurk so close to their cherished cove. Speculation about the attack's causes ran rampant. Investigators pieced together a series of events: the speared yellowtail, the sailor's bleeding wound, the nearby harbor seals, and the drifting whale carcass. Each factor played a role in drawing the shark into waters where such creatures were rarely seen. Over a year later, in November 1960, a skeleton was discovered at the bottom of a submarine canyon, 2,130 feet offshore. The coroner identified the remains as Robert's, bringing a semblance of closure to his family. For Gerald, the memory was sharp and unyielding. Robert's face, stricken with terror, lingered in his mind, as did the violent churning of the water that swallowed him. On August 12, 1963, in Rio Jaina, Dominican Republic, 16-year-old best friends Manuel Garcia, Carlos Diaz, and Raymond Perez sought relief from the oppressing summer heat. Their destination, the breakwater near the port, a familiar spot where they had spent countless hours swimming and diving. But this day would be different. Beneath the inviting waves, something horrifying lurked. The Dominican Republic, known for its stunning coastlines and tropical beauty, is a place where the sea is woven into daily life. The waters surrounding this Caribbean nation are home to diverse marine life, from vibrant coral reefs to deadly predators. Among them are great white sharks, apex predators capable of turning serene waters into chaotic bloodbaths in a matter of seconds. These sharks, perfected by millions of years of evolution, are built for stealth, speed, and lethal precision. Typically, they hunt alone, ambushing their prey with quick, brutal efficiency. But in rare instances, these predators exhibit extraordinary behavior, hunting in groups. Recent research reveals that great whites occasionally coordinate to increase their chances of a successful kill. The waters near Rio Jaina were no stranger to these apex predators, though sightings near the port were rare. 16-year-old Raymond Perez and his best friends Manuel Garcia and Carlos Diaz were inseparable. Growing up in Rio Jaina, they spent countless days exploring their coastal town. On that sweltering summer day, the boys ventured into the breakwater at Port Rio Jaina. Built to shield the port from rough seas, the breakwater was a tempting yet treacherous playground, with its jagged rocks and slippery surfaces. That afternoon, the sea was deceptively calm, and the trio dove into the inviting water, laughing as they challenged each other to underwater games. But the weather shifted abruptly. Dark clouds rolled in over the port, transforming the once placid sea into a chaotic and unpredictable force. The boys, startled by the sudden change, scrambled to climb onto the breakwater, hoping to find safety on the jagged rocks. Waves surged with growing intensity, crashing against the breakwater and making it nearly impossible to keep their footing. A sudden, powerful swell slammed into them, knocking Manuel and Carlos off the rocks and into the churning waters below. Raymond, clinging desperately to the slippery surface, managed to pull himself out of the water just in time. From his precarious position, he could only watch helplessly as the waves carried his two friends farther out to sea. Manuel and Carlos were helpless against the raging current, their bodies battered by the relentless waves. The sharp, jagged edges of the breakwater had torn into their flesh. Manuel's upper right thigh was gashed deeply from being thrown against the rocks, while Carlos's arm was severely cut open after scraping against the sharp barnacles clinging to the submerged stones. Their wounds bled profusely, the crimson streaks swirling into the turbulent water. Unseen beneath the waves, a predator stirred. Great white sharks, drawn by the faintest scent of blood, began converging on the struggling boys. Raymond watched in horror as his friends flailed against the waves. He clung to the jagged rocks, powerless to help, as the current dragged them farther from shore. The laughter of moments ago had turned to desperate cries, barely audible over the roaring surf. What began as an ordinary day had become a nightmare. Little did the boys know, drowning was now the least of their worries. The first shadow appeared silently beneath the surface, then another and another. 8 great white sharks had picked up the scent of blood, each one closing in with lethal intent. These creatures, massive and powerful, were the ocean's ultimate predators. What happened next would defy belief. Manuel felt the first jarring bump against his hip. The impact nearly pulled him under, and as he turned, he saw the fins slicing through the waves. Another violent hit followed, launching him upward. The water erupted as a great white lunged, its massive jaws clamping onto Manuel's torso. Blood sprayed into the sea, fueling the frenzy as more sharks surged forward. Carlos swam toward his friend, but a second shark struck, tearing into Manuel mid-air before dragging him below. The water turned red as the predators thrashed, their tails slapping the waves in a violent spectacle. Within moments, Manuel disappeared beneath the surface. Carlos, now alone, desperately turned toward the shore, adrenaline propelling him forward. The fins multiplied, surrounding him as the sharks closed in. Nearby, a small boat docked at the port sprang into action, its driver spotting the boy's struggle and racing toward him, yelling and pointing in desperation. Just as hope seemed within reach, a massive shadow emerged from the depths. A shark lunged, its jaws clamping onto Carlos's right arm and shaking violently. His screams cut through the chaos, but another shark struck from the other side, pulling him under. The boat arrived moments too late. The sea continued to churn violently, waves crashing against the breakwater and sending spray high into the air. The predators sank beneath the stormy surface, their dark shapes disappearing into the depths. The blood streaks were quickly swallowed by the relentless waves, leaving no sign of what had transpired except for the horrified witnesses on shore. The storm raged on, seemingly determined to erase the devastation it had just unleashed. Raymond was eventually rescued from the breakwater, his trembling hands gripping the jagged rocks until help arrived. Though physically unharmed, the terror etched into his face told a story of unspeakable trauma. He would never forget the chaos, the blood-streaked water, or the haunting cries of his best friends as they disappeared beneath the waves. Manuel and Carlos were gone, their bodies claimed entirely by the unrelenting efficiency of the great white sharks. The ocean, once a source of joy and adventure, had revealed its most merciless side. It was Sunday, November 29, 1964. For most people, it was just another quiet day. The usual crowd took a break from the routines of work and leisure, indulging in their usual uneventful Sunday plans. But Henry Bourse was never part of the usual crowd. The 34-year-old underwater photographer was anything but typical. When he wasn't immersed in the deep, capturing the mysteries of the sea, he was playing his saxophone as the lead for a Melbourne-based rock and roll band. He lived for the thrill of the unknown, and that Sunday was no different. Henry's plan for the day was as bold as it was calculated, diving into the water surrounding Lady Julia Percy Island. This isolated volcanic island about 22 kilometers from Port Fairy wasn't just a striking landform, it was a haven for marine life. Beneath its towering cliffs and around its rugged shoreline, the ocean concealed a world of vibrant reefs, thriving seal colonies, and hidden caves waiting to be explored. Henry was particularly eager to film the seals, capturing their playful movements and interactions on camera. With his diving gear and spearfishing equipment, he prepared to plunge into these untamed waters. He knew the risks. The seals often attracted their apex predator, the great white shark. Yet for Henry, the promise of discovery outweighed the dangers as he readied himself for the adventures below the surface. Accompanying Henry were his close friends, Dietmar Krupa and Fred Arndt, both seasoned divers who shared his hunger for adventure. Their destination, Lady Julia Percy Island, was set in stone. Not even the ominous tales of the sea or the concerned warnings of Henry's girlfriend, Jill Ratcliffe, who was on board with them, could dissuade the trio. For these divers, the allure of filming seals and uncovering the unknown far outweighed the risks. Their journey began aboard a commercial shark fishing vessel docked at Moyne River Wharf. The weathered boat felt like a fitting getaway to the untamed waters ahead. Henry adjusted his black hooded wetsuit, its snug fit preparing him for the icy depths, his underwater camera secured and ready. As they neared the island's shores, the excitement on board was palpable. But amidst the anticipation, there was an unsettling conversation, one that would follow Henry as the day unfolded. They talked about Big Ben, a massive great white shark that supposedly roamed the waters near the island. Some claimed it was over 20 feet long, a monster of the deep with a reputation as monstrous as its size. Local fishermen had scars to prove its existence. Some shrugged it off as nothing more than a myth, a creature born of exaggeration. But others weren't so sure. Henry, however, wasn't worried. He had a job to do, seals to film, a day to capture on film. It was just another story to add to his portfolio. At 12:45 p.m., Henry entered the water. He dove into the deep, the water cool and welcoming. The visibility was poor, but he was used to it. For over an hour, Henry filmed, capturing the seals as they danced in the waves, their sleek bodies gliding through the water. The serene beauty of the ocean was intoxicating. But when he returned to the boat around 1:15 p.m., something seemed wrong. The footage hadn't captured what he had hoped. Unsatisfied with the first film roll, Henry chose to dive again. This time, Dietmar and Fred joined him, each armed with a spear, ready to continue their exploration. As they descended into the murky depths, the lively atmosphere they had experienced earlier began to change. The group initially spotted the seals again, rolling playfully in the waves and darting between the divers with effortless grace. However, within moments, the seals suddenly vanished, their playful energy replaced by an eerie stillness in the water. The water, which had been full of life and movement, had grown still. Despite the poor visibility, it was clear something had shifted. They dove deeper to around 30 feet, searching for the seals, but the ocean gave no answers. After a few moments, they realized they needed to resurface. Something wasn't right. Henry was the first to break the surface, his head emerging into the open air. And then, without warning, something hit him fast and forceful. The impact was unlike anything he'd ever experienced. His body was violently yanked, pulled beneath the water with terrifying speed. In that instant, Henry understood what had attacked him. He threw his arms into the air and screamed, "Shark!" desperately trying to warn the others as he was pulled deeper into the water. The force of the current churned around him, unmistakable in its strength. His mask and snorkel were ripped from his face, and then he realized this was no ordinary shark. It was Big Ben. The massive shark had him. Its grip was unrelenting. Its jaws sank deep into his leg, tearing through flesh as if it were paper. Pain shot through him, but there was something more pressing. He was drowning. The shark didn't just bite, it pulled him under, dragging him into the abyss. In that moment, the world around him turned black. He was suffocating, every breath he tried to take only filling his lungs with water. Henry reached out, his hands grasping at the massive snout of the shark, but it was no use. The creature was too strong. Its teeth sank deeper into his leg as it shook him like a rag doll. And then, just as suddenly as it began, the shark released him. For a split second, there was a strange calm. But it wasn't peace, just a pause before the next onslaught. Henry swam to the surface, gasping for air. The events that had unfolded had shocked him. He reached down to his leg, only to find it gone. The shark had torn it away. His friends, Dietmar and Fred, who had been nearby, quickly swam over to him. They had been caught off guard by the sudden violence, unable to react in time. But just as they reached him, the water shifted. The shark was back, hungry, relentless. It came at Henry again, teeth bared. But this time, Dietmar and Fred were ready. With spears in hand, they fought the shark off, each strike a desperate attempt to keep the predator at bay. The shark was unyielding, coming back again and again, 5 separate times in total. Each time the men fought, the spears bending under the strain. Back in the boat, Jill saw the commotion and quickly started the engine, heading toward the source of the chaos. When she arrived, the sight was horrifying. Instinctively, she threw the safety line toward Henry and his friends. Henry's vision blurred with shock, but he heard Jill's frantic calls as he pulled the safety line. Within moments, he was hauled aboard, his body bleeding heavily. His friends worked quickly to keep him conscious as first aid was administered. The boat raced toward Port Fairy, where an ambulance awaited with a blood transfusion. Henry had lost 3.5 liters of blood, yet somehow he was still alive. The doctors worked quickly to stabilize him, but the road to recovery would be long. Despite the severity of the attack, Henry made an incredible recovery. Just weeks later, he was back in the water doing what he loved. In 1968, he released a documentary titled Savage Shadow, featuring raw footage of the attack, a stark reminder of the ocean's unpredictability. It was a calm and sunny afternoon in Middle Harbour, Australia on January 4th. The waters off the estuary shimmered under the light, a tranquil scene framed by the dense brushland that lined the shore. Zetta Stedman, 27, had been looking forward to this day for weeks. Along with her friends, she had planned a picnic at Egg Rock, a picturesque spot nestled in the rugged coastline off the North Shore. The morning had unfolded beautifully. They had arrived on a motor launch, their laughter mingling with the soft hum of the boat's engine as they approached the secluded cove. Middle Harbour was known for its serene waters and abundant wildlife. Despite being relatively enclosed and far from the open ocean, the estuary's connection to Sydney Harbour meant it occasionally saw visits from larger marine creatures. Among these were bull sharks, notorious for their aggressive nature and ability to thrive in both salt and fresh water. Zetta and her friends, aware of the area's reputation, dismissed the risks. After all, the water seemed so inviting, clear, shallow, and harmless. Zetta's day had started early, her excitement evident as she prepared the picnic essentials. In her small kitchen, she carefully packed a wicker basket with freshly baked bread, ripe fruit, and other treats. The morning sunlight filtered through the windows, promising a warm and pleasant day. It was a perfect setting for their long-planned outing. By mid-morning, she was on her way to the dock, where her friends, Mr. and Mrs. Bowes, Mrs. Reeve, and her son-in-law Frederick waited, already exchanging light-hearted banter. By mid-afternoon, the group had settled into their picnic. The scent of the sea mingled with the aroma of their food. They lounged on blankets spread over the rocky shore, sharing stories and enjoying the stunning views of Middle Harbour. Nearby, cicadas buzzed, their sound blending with the gentle lapping of waves against the rocks. As the day progressed, Zetta, the ever-adventurous one, suggested they cool off with a swim. The others hesitated but eventually agreed, and soon the group was wading into the water, laughing as the coolness contrasted with the heat of the day. At first, they stayed close to the shore, splashing in waist-deep water. But as the minutes passed, Zetta ventured further out, drawn by the clarity of the water and the allure of the deeper blue beyond. She stood in chest-high water, enjoying the gentle sway of the current and the feeling of weightlessness. Her friends, Mr. and Mrs. Bowes, called out to her from closer to the shore, cautioning her not to go too far. Zetta waved back, smiling, and began to make her way toward them. Unbeknownst to the group, a predator was already nearby, a 14-foot bull shark. A master of ambush had silently entered the estuary. Its movements were deliberate, its senses tuned to the vibrations of its surroundings. It had likely been drawn by fish or other prey in the area, but now it had found something else, something larger, more tantalizing. The shark circled Zetta, its shadow passing unseen beneath the surface. It cocked its head slightly, sizing her up. Its movements were patient and calculated. Then, in a sudden burst of speed, it struck. Zetta felt a force like a vice clamp onto her lower body. The water around her exploded into a frenzy of movement and foam. She screamed, her voice piercing the tranquil air and sending her friends into a panic. From the shore, Mrs. Reeve, one of Zetta's friends, watched in horror. Perched on a rocky outcrop, she had a clear view of the attack. She screamed for her son-in-law Frederick, who had remained on board the motor launch a few feet away from Zeta. Frederick turned to see Zeta thrashing in the water. Without hesitation, he grabbed an oar and dove into the water, swimming toward her with all his strength. Frederick reached Zeta and swung the oar with desperate force, striking the water near the shark's head. The blows made little impact on the determined predator. The shark began pulling Zeta further into deeper waters, the reddish cloud of blood spreading ominously around her. Realizing the oar would not suffice, Frederick swam back to the motor launch and started the engine. He steered the boat toward the shark, aiming to ram it. The boat's hull struck the water with a loud splash, narrowly missing the predator. The shark released Zeta momentarily but lunged again, dragging her further into deeper waters. Frederick leaped from the boat, grabbing hold of Zeta's arm. With a strength born of desperation, he pulled her toward him. The shark resisted, thrashing violently, but Frederick's grip held firm. Finally, with a sickening tear, the shark relinquished its hold. Frederick pulled Zeta's torso onto the boat, but the lower half of her body was gone. The water around them was stained red. Zeta was unresponsive, her skin pale, her breathing shallow. Frederick called to the others on shore to call for help. The motor launch sped toward the nearest dock, but it was clear to all on board that Zeta's chances were slim. By the time they reached land and paramedics arrived, she was gone. In the days that followed, the attack sent shockwaves through the community. Reports of the incident dominated local news, and authorities issued warnings about sharks in Middle Harbor. The bull shark that attacked Zeta had ventured into the estuary, taking advantage of the shallow, warm waters that provide the perfect hunting grounds for this species. Bull sharks thrive in such environments. It was October 2010, and the California sun hung heavy in the morning sky, casting a golden glow over Surf Beach near Vandenberg Air Force Base. The air was cool, a crisp reminder that autumn had arrived, but the water still held the warmth of summer. Matthew Garcia and Lucas Ransom had been waiting for this moment for months. College had kept them too busy, and they had not seen the ocean for far too long. The surf was calling them back, and after a rare weekend away from campus at Lucas's parents' house in Riverside County, they were eager to dive back in. The trip had started with Lucas's enthusiasm, eager to escape the confines of home as soon as he arrived. His mother Candace had tried to persuade him and Matt to linger, suggesting they spend more time at home before heading to the beach. But Lucas, a seasoned swimmer and licensed lifeguard, was confident and dismissive of her concerns. He had grown up in the surf, as comfortable in the water as he was on land. Candace wasn't worried about the sea itself, it was something deeper, a nagging intuition she couldn't shake, though she couldn't put her finger on why. By the time they reached Surf Beach, the morning had unfolded into a picture-perfect scene. The sun glinted off the water, casting brilliant reflections as surfers filled the waves. The boys joined them, eager to catch up on the waves they'd missed during the past few months. For hours, everything seemed to fall into place. The surf was steady, the water clear, and the sun bright. As the morning wore on, Lucas and Matt found a moment of respite on the sandbank, about 100 yards from shore. The water was chest deep, ideal for a quick break between waves. They planned to catch a few more swells before heading to a food truck to carb up for the rest of the day. Matt lay across his board, soaking in the calm before paddling back out, while Lucas, lying on his stomach, prepared for the next wave. Then the water shifted. A subtle change in the current went unnoticed by the two friends. Beneath the surface, something moved. Fast and quiet, a shadow growing larger. Without warning, the massive shadow of a great white shark appeared, slicing through the water with terrifying precision. The wave that crested ahead of them hid the predator. But as it rose, so too did the shark, its gray body blending with the foam. It was a blur, but unmistakably there. Its mouth opened, revealing rows of teeth. And then, in a flash, the attack was upon them. Matt was standing just 2 feet away from Lucas, and in an instant, a massive body slammed into him. The tail knocked him away, sending him spinning several feet through the water, disoriented and confused. Matt barely had time to register what had just happened before his eyes locked onto the monstrous predator. It was the shark, the great white, its sheer size overwhelming. The predator's focus was not on Matt, it was Lucas. The shark lunged with terrifying speed, and its massive jaws clamped down on Lucas. It was like a flash of lightning, a brutal and efficient strike. Lucas barely had time to scream before the beast dragged him beneath the surface in a rush of blood and foam. The air was thick with the sound of splashing, the sharp metallic scent of blood filling the water. Matt, still stunned, reacted without thought. His body moved before his mind could catch up, desperation taking over. He dove into the blood-tinged water, searching frantically. The water around him was thick with red, too murky to see clearly. Then he caught sight of Lucas's dark curls floating on the surface. His friend was still alive, barely, but the clock was ticking. The shark had disappeared, but its presence still hung in the water, a lingering threat beneath the surface. With one hand gripping his board and the other desperately clutching Lucas, Matt paddled furiously toward the shore, the blood staining the water around them, a constant reminder of the danger. Every stroke felt urgent. There was no time to think. The fear that the shark could return at any moment made each second feel like a lifetime. The crowd on the beach had already noticed something was wrong. People screamed and scattered in panic as Matt and Lucas rode a wave toward shore. The sight that greeted them was a nightmare. Lucas's boogie board was still attached to his right foot by the ankle strap, but his left leg was gone. The shark had ripped it clean off, leaving only a mangled stump. Blood poured from the wound, soaking the sand beneath him, but Lucas was slipping away. His chest barely rose and fell. His eyes had rolled back into his head and his body was slack, a faint breath the only sign he was still alive. Matt's hands were covered in blood as he tried to stem the flow, pressing down on the mangled stump in a futile attempt to stop the bleeding. A bystander rushed to help, tearing off his shirt to tie a tourniquet around Lucas's leg, but it was too late. The damage was catastrophic. The femoral artery had been severed. In less than a minute, Lucas had lost enough blood that survival was impossible. Despite their frantic efforts, Lucas let out one last shuddering breath before his body went still. The ambulance arrived, but there was nothing anyone could do. Lucas's body was taken away, and Matt, in shock, was sedated and rushed to the hospital. The reality hit hard. His best friend was gone, and he was left to face the aftermath alone. The beach was closed as search efforts began. Boats and helicopters scoured the waters, but the shark was gone, leaving only the accounts of Matt and another surfer describing a massive predator. Memorials soon appeared on the beach, flowers and teddy bears marking Lucas's life. At the funeral, Matt carried his friend's body, grief overwhelming him. His dorm room felt impossibly empty, the surfboard in the corner untouched. It wasn't until a year later that Matt found the strength to return to the water. Surf Beach, where everything had changed, called to him. With Lucas's memory in his heart, Matt faced his fear, ready to find joy in the ocean again. The warm afternoon sun bathed the sands of Greenmount Beach on September 8, 2020. Nestled at the southern end of Queensland's Gold Coast near the border with New South Wales, this stretch of golden shoreline had always been a haven for surfers and tourists. That Tuesday was no different, and surfers flocked to the water eager to make the most of the perfect conditions. Among them was Nick Slater, a 46-year-old real estate agent from Mermaid Beach. Nick was more than just a professional, he was a cherished member of the Gold Coast community. Known for his warm personality and infectious enthusiasm, Nick had a lifelong passion for surfing. He often spoke about how the ocean brought him peace and joy, providing a much-needed escape from the demands of his career. Greenmount wasn't just a favorite surf spot for Nick, it felt like home. That day, the clear skies and the water, a comfortable 68 degrees, seemed to promise nothing but serenity. Grabbing his board, Nick headed out to join the other surfers scattered across the breaks, their figures dotting the glistening expanse of the sea. But just below the surface, the ocean concealed its darker side. The waters around Greenmount, while breathtakingly beautiful, also served as a habitat for one of nature's most fearsome predators, the great white shark. As Nick pushed further out, unaware of the lurking danger, the calm waters offered no hint of the tragedy about to unfold. Around 5 p.m., tragedy struck. Without warning, a shadow emerged beneath the waves. A great white shark estimated to be around 10 feet long charged upward. The impact was ferocious. Witnesses saw Nick's board fly into the air before splashing back down unmanned. Blood began to spread across the water as surfers nearby realized the horrifying truth that Nick had been attacked. Fellow surfer Jade Parker was the first to respond. Spotting Nick floating near his board, Jade raced toward him, fearing the worst. At first, he thought Nick might have been knocked unconscious by his board, but as he approached, the grim reality became clear. Nick was seriously injured, his left arm torn apart by the shark's powerful bite. Jade later described the scene as terrifying beyond words. Jade and a few other surfers managed to pull Nick onto his board and paddle him back to shore. The journey was frantic and desperate, with every second essential to Nick's survival. Blood trailed behind him, and while the shark seemed to have retreated, the possibility of another strike remained. When they reached the sand, a crowd had already gathered, drawn by the commotion. Lifeguards and beachgoers immediately mobilized, forming a coordinated effort to bring Nick to safety and provide life-saving care. In a race against time, can the efforts of strangers overcome the odds stacked by nature's fiercest predator? Using whatever resources they had on hand, they attempted to stabilize him while awaiting professional assistance. Within minutes, paramedics arrived on the scene, bringing advanced medical equipment and expertise. They began administering emergency treatment, applying pressure to control the severe bleeding and assessing the extent of the injuries. The team worked tirelessly to keep him alive, fighting against the critical loss of blood and the extensive damage inflicted by the shark. Nick's injuries were catastrophic, with massive trauma to his leg causing irreparable damage. The blood loss had been severe, and despite the lifeguards' quick actions and the paramedics' relentless efforts, his condition continued to deteriorate. Onlookers stood in tense silence, hoping for a miracle as the medical team worked against the odds. Tragically, their efforts were not enough. Nick succumbed to his injuries on the beach, leaving the community in shock and mourning the loss of a man whose life revolved around the very ocean that claimed him. An investigation revealed that the bite mark on Nick's surfboard formed a rough circle nearly 15 inches across. Embedded in the fiberglass was a single tooth, unmistakably belonging to a great white shark, one of the ocean's most fearsome predators. These apex hunters, with their torpedo-shaped bodies, can reach speeds of up to 35 miles per hour. Their bite force, exceeding 4,000 pounds, allows them to deliver devastating strikes with deadly precision. The attack on Nick was no exception. Quick, calculated, and tragically fatal. In the wake of Nick's death, authorities closed beaches along the Gold Coast from Burleigh Heads to the New South Wales border. Helicopters scanned the waters and shark nets were inspected for breaches. Nick's death marked the first fatal shark attack on a Gold Coast beach in over 6 decades. The incident reignited debates about shark control measures such as nets and drum lines, which have been criticized for harming marine life without guaranteeing human safety. While these methods aim to reduce shark interactions, they cannot eliminate the risks entirely. The tragedy brought to light the delicate balance between protecting beachgoers and preserving the ocean's ecosystem. For the local community, the loss of Nick Slater was deeply felt. Friends and family remembered him as a kind-hearted, passionate surfer who loved life and the ocean. Greenmount Beach, usually a symbol of joy and adventure, became a somber place in the days following the attack. The Gold Coast community mourned the loss of one of their own, while surfers and beachgoers reevaluated their relationship with the sea. Yet, for many, the allure of the ocean remained, as did the understanding that every wave carries a measure of risk. It was November 30th, 2013 on the picturesque coastline of New South Wales, Australia. 19-year-old Zach Young and his three closest friends, Shaden Schrader, Kurt Gillian, and Lindsay Isaac, set out for a day of surfing at Campbell's Beach, a serene but remote stretch of sand renowned for its vibrant waves and stunning natural beauty. The group made their way to The Well, a popular reef break roughly 300 feet offshore near Rykes Point, ready for an afternoon of adventure. New South Wales is a haven for surfers, its coastline boasting some of the finest surf spots in the world. But beneath its beautiful waters lie a dangerous reality. The region is also home to one of the ocean's most efficient predators, the tiger shark. With its sharp senses, striped body, and reputation as a non-discriminating feeder, the tiger shark is second only to the great white in attacks on humans. These waters, while breathtaking, demanded respect, and those who venture in understand the risks they take. Zach, known for his radiant smile and unwavering faith, had recently earned his driver's license, a milestone that fueled his excitement to explore coastal surfing spots with his friends. A lifelong surfer, Zach's talent on the waves was matched only by the admiration he inspired off the board. Beyond his dedication to the sport, he was a cornerstone of his community, mentoring at-risk youth through a national youth ministry and sharing his experiences to inspire others. His energy, kindness, and passion for uplifting those around him made him a beloved figure to everyone who knew him. The ocean that Zach loved so deeply seemed serene that day, its clear waters reflecting the golden afternoon sunlight. The friends laughed as they paddled out, their boards cutting through the waves, unaware of the silent danger below. Beneath the shimmering surface, something stirred. Shadows moved with predatory intent, unseen and unprovoked, ready to strike. Just before 2 p.m., the illusion of calm shattered. From the depths, a dark shape surged upward. A massive tiger shark, estimated at 10 feet long, lunged at Zach with incredible force, its serrated teeth sinking into his legs. The peaceful day turned into a desperate fight for survival. The force of the attack knocked Zach from his board, and blood clouded the water as his friends realized the horrifying reality. Acting on pure instinct, Shaden, Kurt, and Lindsay paddled towards Zach, their adrenaline surging as they fought to save their friend. Despite the immediate danger, they reached him, using their boards and fists to drive the shark away. The predator, momentarily deterred, released Zach, retreating into the depths. The group quickly pulled Zach onto one of their boards. His injuries were catastrophic. His legs bore deep gashes and blood poured from the wounds, staining the water around them. Knowing the shark could return at any moment, the friends began the immense 15-minute paddle back to shore, their every movement filled with urgency and fear. Waves splashed over Zach's pale, trembling form as he clung to consciousness, weakly mouthing words of gratitude to his friends. Would their courage be enough to fend off a relentless predator and save their friend? The paddle back to shore felt like an eternity. They paddled with relentless urgency, their movements quick and focused as they glanced over their shoulders, scanning the water for any sign of the predator. The tension in their faces and the haste in their strokes made it clear the danger wasn't over. Finally, they reached the sand, pulling him onto the beach. When Zach reached the shore, he was in critical condition. His legs were severely mauled and his body was pale from the significant blood loss. His breaths were shallow and his friends had to carry him, his limp body a sign of the ferocity of the attack. Despite their best efforts, Zach's injuries were catastrophic and his life was slipping away. Emergency services were called by nearby beachgoers who had witnessed the chaos. On the sands of Campbell's Beach, Zach's friends fought desperately to save him, their hands trembling as they tried to stop the bleeding. Gravely injured and weak, Zach, a person of deep faith, began to pray aloud, his voice faltering. With his final breath, he said, "I love you guys, I love you." A heartbreaking witness of their bond and Zach's caring spirit. Moments later, his body stilled, leaving his friends and the beach in stunned silence. The loss of Zach Young deeply shook his community and the surfing world. After the attack, Campbell's Beach was closed as water police, marine rescue teams, and Surf Lifesaving New South Wales scoured the waters for the tiger shark responsible. A biologist analysis confirmed the attacker was an 8-foot tiger shark, its powerful jaws leaving devastating wounds. Shortly after Zach's death, up to 400 surfers paddled out at Town Beach in Port Macquarie for a powerful memorial. They formed a circle on their boards, prayed, and held a minute of silence to honor Zach. Online, a tribute page overflowed with messages of love and sorrow, many recalling his warmth and generosity. Zach's friends, Shaden Schrader, Kurt Gillian, and Lindsay Isaac, expressed their determination to continue surfing, knowing Zach would have wanted them to embrace the waves they all loved. Their resilience and courage demonstrated the strength of their bond and their commitment to honoring his memory. It was a breezy Friday afternoon on December 8, 2023, when Matteo Mariotti, a 20-year-old Italian student, decided to visit 1770 Beach on Australia's eastern coastline. For Matteo, Australia was more than just a destination, it was a dream come true. Ever since moving from Parma in 2022, the aspiring marine biologist had immersed himself in the country's rich biodiversity, exploring every hidden cove and thriving reef. Among all his pursuits, snorkeling had become his passion, offering a window into the mesmerizing underwater world he longed to study. But that day, Matteo wasn't just seeking the thrill of discovery. Hours earlier, news had arrived from Italy that his grandfather Giovanni had passed away. The weight of being thousands of miles from home, unable to say goodbye, hung heavily on him. Matteo had hoped that the ocean's embrace might soothe his mind and offer a brief escape from his grief, a hope that would soon prove to be in vain. The shores of 1770 Beach were famed for their rugged beauty, where jagged rocks framed stretches of golden sand. For an experienced adventurer like Matteo, the rocky entry was barely an obstacle. Dressed in his wetsuit with his snorkel mask secured and his GoPro strapped to his wrist, he turned his focus to the sea. The water was murky, churned by recent winds, but that only added to the thrill of uncovering the hidden marine life below. As Matteo ventured farther from the shore, the ocean's silence grew heavier. There were no darting fish or vibrant flashes of coral, just an endless expanse of gray-green water stretching in every direction. He paused, floating quietly, his eyes scanning the shifting shadows below. Something moved. At first it was faint, a flicker at the edge of his vision. Matteo turned, but whatever it was had vanished. He kept swimming, though the thought of being watched clung to him. The silhouette seemed to shift around him, but every time he looked, it was gone. The uneasy quiet pressed down on him. He glanced back toward the beach. His friends were small, distant figures on the shore. The horizon looked impossibly far away, and for the first time, Matteo wondered if he should head back. Then it came. A sudden force slammed into him and the water exploded in a frenzy of movement. Matteo barely had time to react before searing pain shot through his leg. A shark had clamped its powerful jaws around him, dragging him downward. The world blurred as the attack unfolded. Mateo thrashed, trying to free himself, but the shark's grip was relentless. Its teeth sank deeper into his flesh with each struggle, the water around them darkening with blood. Desperate, Mateo grabbed his GoPro, his trembling fingers fumbling as he struggled to switch it on. Pain and panic clouded his mind, but one thought stood out. Someone needed to know what was happening. If this was his end, the camera would bear witness to it. As the device began recording, he fought to stay afloat, his strength ebbing with each passing second. On the shore, Mateo's friends remained oblivious to the unfolding nightmare beyond the waves. It was Tommaso Agasti, a trained nurse and a member of the group, who first noticed the commotion in the water. Without hesitation, he sprinted into the surf, desperate to reach Mateo in time. As Tommaso approached, Mateo fought with everything he had left. A desperate kick landed against the shark's head, his swim fin jamming into its mouth. The predator momentarily loosened its grip, and Tommaso took the chance to grab Mateo, pulling him toward the shore. The journey back was grueling, each step slowed by the unrelenting waves and Mateo's injuries. The rocky shoreline posed its own challenge, but Tommaso managed to haul Mateo onto the jagged ground. Thinking quickly, he removed his belt and fashioned a makeshift tourniquet, tightening it above Mateo's mangled leg to stem the bleeding. One of the friends on shore grabbed their phone and called for emergency services, their voice tense as the situation unfolded. Minutes felt like hours as they waited. Finally, the sound of sirens cut through the air, bringing a glimmer of hope. Paramedics worked swiftly to stabilize Mateo, but the extent of his injuries was devastating. He was airlifted to Bundaberg Hospital, where doctors confirmed the worst. His right leg would have to be amputated below the knee to save his life. In the days that followed, Mateo grappled with the reality of his new life. The attack had changed everything. Yet he refused to let it define him. His thoughts often turned to his grandfather, finding comfort in the belief that Giovanni's spirit had protected him during the ordeal. Despite the trauma, Mateo's passion for marine biology remained undeterred. He knew that sharks played a vital role in maintaining the ocean's delicate balance. It was a warm May morning in 2019 when Thomas Smiley, 65, walked down the beach toward the water at Kapali Beach Park on the western shore of Maui. For the past 14 years, this had been a place of retreat for Thomas and his wife Gail, a sanctuary where they would recharge and reflect. It had been a tradition for them, and now, in his early retirement, Thomas had planned to spend more time enjoying the things he loved. His family, his hobbies, and the serene shores of Hawaii. Thomas had retired just the year before from his successful career as an optometrist, having owned practices in Roseville and Sacramento. But retirement wasn't just about the rest, it was about living life to the fullest, spending more time with his family and pursuing his passions. He'd always been the adventurous type, an antique and muscle car enthusiast, a member of the Sports Car Club of America, and a vintage stock car racer. In fact, just 2 weeks away, he was due to race his prized 1965 Corvette in an advanced pro class on tracks across Northern California. But today, he was looking forward to his last swim before returning to California the following day. Thomas was highly accomplished, having earned an undergraduate degree in cell biology from UCLA and a doctorate in optometry from UC Berkeley. His intellectual pursuits had always been matched by his thirst for adventure. Whether it was racing cars, scuba diving, or swimming in the Pacific, Thomas embraced every opportunity with enthusiasm. This day, however, would take a tragic turn. It was 9 a.m. when he waded into the water alone. Gail, as always, was content to watch from the shore, where the sun warmed the sand and the waves whispered softly. She had no inkling that this would be the last time she would see Thomas alive. Kapali Beach was a picturesque stretch of coastline, with clear turquoise waters that shimmered under the morning sun. But beneath the surface, hidden from the sun's rays, a silent threat was approaching. A tiger shark, one of the largest and most aggressive species of sharks, its movements being tracked by the Department of Land and Natural Resources. Authorities were aware of the predator's presence, but there were no warning signs posted, and tourists continued to enter the water without hesitation. The shark, a 15-foot beast weighing over 1,000 pounds, had been swimming along the shore for hours undisturbed. Thomas, unaware of the danger beneath him, swam parallel to the shore about 60 yards out. He was an experienced swimmer accustomed to the ocean, a man who had spent decades in the water without incident. But as he moved through the calm waters, a shadow began to loom behind him. The tiger shark, drawn to the movement, circled slowly, its massive body cutting through the water with precision. Without warning, the shark lunged. Its massive teeth sank into Thomas's left leg, the sheer force of the bite dragging him beneath the surface. The pain was immediate, excruciating. Thomas knew exactly what was happening. The shark had attacked, but the fight for his life had only just begun. Gail, who had been enjoying the morning from the lanai, heard a commotion. She looked out across the ocean where she saw people pointing and gesturing. There was someone struggling in the water, thrashing around. Her heart skipped a beat. Was it Thomas? She watched for a moment, confused. It wasn't like him to struggle in the water. Thomas was a strong swimmer, confident in the ocean's embrace. But something wasn't right. The man in the water was flailing, his body convulsing in a way that didn't seem natural. Gail's worry deepened. On the shore, bystanders stared helplessly as Thomas fought to make it back to safety. The water around him turned red, clouded with blood as he struggled to stay afloat. He was losing strength, his movements slowing, the attack taking its toll. Witnesses on the beach could only watch in horror as Thomas, his leg mangled, attempted to swim toward the shore, but with every stroke it seemed like he was sinking further. The life-saving jet ski had been scrambled late, too late to intervene before the worst had already happened. By the time the police rescue unit arrived on the watercraft, Thomas was unresponsive, his body barely moving. The shark had retreated, disappearing beneath the surface. The rescuers worked quickly, pulling him onto the jet ski, his body limp and bloodied, a pool of dark water trailing behind them as they sped back toward the shore. Gail stood frozen on the beach, her gaze fixed on the water. The moment the rescuers reached the shore and pulled Thomas's lifeless body from the jet ski, her heart stopped. She knew, without seeing his face, that it was him. It was Thomas. His swimsuit, his build, everything confirmed her worst fear. She ran to him, crying out as she dropped to his side. He was pale, unresponsive. The love of her life, the man she had been inseparable from for over 40 years, was gone. Despite attempts at CPR, it was too late. Thomas's injuries were catastrophic. His left leg severed below the knee, his wrist shredded from fighting off the shark. He had bled out, losing too much blood to survive. The attack came without warning, no signs, no barricades. Thomas, a man who had faced life's challenges with vigor, was caught off guard in the wrong place at the wrong time. His death sent shockwaves through his family. A man who lived for adventure and loved his family deeply, Thomas left behind 3 children and 6 grandchildren, who now mourned his loss. Gail, his wife of 42 years, was left to navigate life without him. Though she didn't blame officials, Gail knew that had they been informed of the shark's presence, Thomas would have stayed on shore. Hawaii averages about 20 shark attacks a year, but Thomas's was the first fatal one since 2015 and the 6th of the year. Some linked the rise in attacks to climate change, but for Gail, none of that mattered. Her world had changed in an instant, and now she would have to move forward without him. It was June 8, 2023, a seemingly typical summer day at the Dream Beach Hotel in Hurghada, Egypt. The turquoise waters off the Red Sea shimmered under the bright sun, drawing locals and tourists to its inviting shores. Families, vacationers, and holidaymakers filled the beach, relishing the cold waters and tranquil atmosphere. Among them were a Russian father and son, Yuri and Vladimir Popov, blending into the lively crowd. Yuri, a reserved man in his late 40s, sat on the sand watching as his 23-year-old son Vladimir waded into the water. Originally from Arkhangelsk, Russia, Vladimir had moved to Egypt with his family a few months earlier, working remotely as an IT specialist. The Popovs had settled in Hurghada, seeking a fresh start far from the turmoil back home. That day, they came to the beach for a moment of peace, unaware of the tragedy about to unfold. The beach was alive with activity, people splashing in the shadows and gliding down water slides. Vladimir swam further out, joining his family in the calm, inviting sea. The area was under lifeguard watch and the atmosphere felt safe and carefree. It seemed like a picture-perfect day, but beneath the surface an unseen danger lurked. And then it happened. A commotion broke out. Shouts echoed across the water, voices rising in panic. Vladimir, caught in the middle of the sea, glanced around in confusion. That's when he saw it. A dark, menacing dorsal fin cutting through the waves. A shark. Onlookers screamed warnings, urging everyone to swim to shore, but for Vladimir, it was already too late. The shark, a massive tiger shark, locked its gaze on Vladimir from below. Slowly, it began to circle, its movements deliberate and calculating. Vladimir, sensing the danger too late, tried to swim toward the shore where his father Yuri was watching from the beach, but the water was too deep and he was too far from safety. Without warning, the shark lunged, its powerful jaws snapping around Vladimir's body. Panic gripped him as the shark dragged him beneath the surface. Struggling for his life, Vladimir thrashed in the water, his legs kicking above the surface in a desperate attempt to break free. The water around him quickly turned red as the shark tore into him, pulling him deeper into the ocean. For a brief moment, everything went still. Vladimir's body surfaced motionless, blood-stained water swirling around him. Was he alive? Could he make it to safety? Miraculously, Vladimir stirred. He was still alive. Summoning every ounce of strength, Vladimir began to swim toward the shore. The crowd on the beach watched helpless as the shark loomed beneath the water, its shadow circling. The predator had not finished its attack. It had sensed Vladimir's weakness and was closing in for another strike. Vladimir's voice rang out, a desperate cry to his father, Yuri, on the beach. "Papa, Papa!" The words echoed across the water, a final haunting plea for help. But the shark was already upon him. It struck again, its jaws sinking into Vladimir's torso. His body was yanked underwater, thrashing violently as the shark clung to him. This was no random attack. It was a calculated, deadly strike. Witnesses saw the shark's massive body rising out of the water, rolling over and over as it tore into Vladimir. His form disappeared beneath the waves, never to resurface. Yuri, standing helplessly on the shore, could do nothing but watch his son fight for his life. The minutes dragged on, but in reality, the attack had only lasted a matter of seconds, about 20 in total. In those brief moments, Vladimir's fate was sealed, and his father was left to witness the unimaginable. A lifeguard who had seen the attack unfold from the shore rushed into action. He quickly boarded a speedboat, gunning the engine to reach the scene. But by the time he arrived, it was too late. Vladimir's body had been dragged out of sight. Eyewitnesses later reported that the shark continued to circle, pulling the body under the water and resurfacing several times, a brutal display of the predator's power. For up to 2 hours, the shark remained in the area, a silent and ominous presence. The authorities launched a search for the shark, which had stayed in the area, circling the waters. After a tense struggle, they managed to capture it in a net and drag it to shore. A crowd gathered as the grim scene unfolded. The shark, still alive but weakened, was clubbed to death by the crowd. The violent and bloody end marked a tragic conclusion for both the man and the beast. The beach, once a symbol of relaxation, was closed for several days. Local authorities shut down nearly 50 miles of coastline, prohibiting swimming and water activities. Tourists, shaken by the tragedy, began to question the safety of the Red Sea's waters. Despite the rarity of such attacks in the area, the local tourism industry, which relied heavily on the appeal of the beach and its crystal-clear waters, now faced a long recovery. The incident in Hurghada would be a grim reminder of the dangers lurking beneath the surface, one that would linger in the minds of all who witnessed. It was a clear, warm December afternoon in 1998. Boa Viagem Beach, one of Recife's most iconic destinations, stretched out in a golden expanse along the Atlantic coast. The vibrant atmosphere was unmistakable. Families laughing under beach umbrellas, vendors calling out to passers-by, and the gentle ebb and flow of the ocean in the background. The sun hung high in the sky, casting a golden sheen on the water, making the beach seem like an idyllic paradise. Yet beneath its inviting surface, something far more dangerous waited, unseen and silent. Ana Paula Mendez, 19 years, had always been drawn to nature. A second-year environmental science student, she had spent most of her life studying the intricate balance of ecosystems and biodiversity. Adventure was in her blood, and wherever she went, she carried the energy of someone who found joy in the smallest discoveries. Alongside her was her cousin, Sofia Araujo, 18 years old, a gentle soul with a love for helping others. Sofia had just graduated high school, preparing to study nursing. The two were as different as night and day. Ana, bold and fearless, and Sofia, more reserved but deeply compassionate. Despite their differences, they shared a bond that only family could create. It was on this trip to Recife that they would create memories to last a lifetime. Memories that would forever be overshadowed by a tragedy neither of them could have anticipated. The warm sand beneath their feet felt perfect as they set up their spot near the lifeguard tower. The beach was crowded, filled with tourists and locals alike, enjoying the final hours of daylight before the evening would usher them to their next destinations. Ana had been looking forward to the ocean, and Sofia, though more cautious, trusted her cousin's enthusiasm. After spending the morning exploring Recife, the girls were eager to enjoy the calm of the beach before they had to leave for their flight back to Sao Paulo. They took their time walking along the shore, talking about their trip and their future plans. Brazil's coastline was renowned for its rich marine life, but decades of human development had disrupted the delicate balance of these ecosystems. The construction of Sape Port in the 1980s, located in the state of Pernambuco, significantly altered the natural flow of currents and the behavior of marine species in the area. This massive project destroyed mangroves and seagrass beds, crucial habitats for many marine species, and forced predators like sharks to adapt to the changing environment. The disruption pushed some shark species, particularly bull sharks, closer to the shore. Bull sharks are known for their territorial nature and aggression, thriving in both salt and brackish waters. The altered currents and reduced availability of prey drove them to hunt closer to the coastline, where human activity increased their encounters with swimmers and surfers. By 1998, Recife had already earned a reputation for shark attacks, with at least 20 recorded incidents since the early 1990s. Of these attacks, nearly half were fatal, sparking growing concern among locals and marine biologists. Unaware of this grim reputation, the girls waded into the water, their feet sinking into the soft sand beneath the waves. The ocean seemed perfect, gentle and clear, its calm surface betraying nothing of the danger it concealed. They ventured deeper, the water rising to their chests, and laughed as they felt the rhythmic pull of the tide. After spending some time in the water, the tide was shifting, making it harder to see beneath the surface. Sediment from the seabed began to swirl, stirred by the recent rains that had loosened sand and debris. Within minutes, the once crystal clear water turned murky. Ana glanced at the water around them, noticing how the vibrant blue had become cloudy. She hesitated for a moment but brushed it off, thinking it was just part of the tide's natural rhythm. Sophia, still enjoying the waves, playfully splashed water unfazed by the subtle change. They lingered in now murkier water, talking and laughing, unaware of the danger lurking below. Bull sharks are opportunistic hunters, known for thriving in murky waters where their prey is less likely to detect them. This heightened ability to hunt in reduced visibility makes them particularly dangerous in conditions like those now forming around Anna and Sophia. When they felt that they had swum enough, Anna suggested they head back to shore. Sophia nodded and they turned toward the beach, the sunlight glinting off the waves ahead. It was then that something caught Anna's eye, a dark shape moving swiftly beneath the surface. She stopped in her tracks, her heart skipping a beat, but dismissed it as a trick of the light or a drifting shadow. She called out to Sophia, who was still a few feet away, her face calm as she floated in the water, but it was too late. The shark had already made its way towards Sophia, moving with terrifying speed beneath the murky waves. Sophia screamed, her voice muffled by the water as a bull shark, nearly 8 feet long, clamped its powerful jaws around her leg, dragging her under. Blood swirled in the water as Sophia thrashed in a desperate attempt to free herself. Anna turned, horror flooding her senses as she saw her cousin disappear beneath the waves, her body briefly surfacing before vanishing again. Instinctively, Anna swam toward her, reaching out in a futile attempt to pull her to safety, but the shark was relentless. It released Sophia only to strike again, its teeth sinking into her thigh with terrifying force. Anna was in a panic now as she grasped Sophia's arm, trying to pull her away, but the predator wasn't done. It turned its attention to Anna, locking its jaws around her arm. Anna screamed as the pressure crushed her bones. Her body went limp in the shark's grip, but the predator remained undeterred. The pain was overwhelming, and Anna slipped in and out of consciousness. Lifeguards rushed to the scene, their whistles piercing through the chaos. At the sound of the commotion, the shark finally released its hold and retreated. A rescue board was quickly placed under Anna, and she was hauled to safety, her blood staining the ocean around her. Sophia, however, was not so lucky. Lifeguards reached her moments later. The injuries were too severe. She had sustained massive blood loss from the shark's bite to her thigh. Her body was carried back to the shore, where it was confirmed she did not survive the attack. Anna was rushed to a hospital where surgeons worked frantically to save her life. Her left arm was amputated below the elbow, and although she would survive, no medical intervention could undo the emotional toll of the attack or the loss of her beloved cousin. In the aftermath of the tragedy, the beach was closed indefinitely as authorities investigated the attack and worked to implement stricter safety measures. Shark nets were placed along the shoreline in an effort to prevent future attacks. But despite these precautions, the bull shark responsible for the incident was never found. Locals mourned the loss of Sophia, and the once bustling shoreline became eerily silent, a stark reminder of the dangers that lurked beneath the waves. It was a clear and warm morning on August 25, 2023 at Lighthouse Beach, located south of Port Macquarie on Australia's New South Wales coast. The sun gleamed over the tranquil water, casting a golden light across the sand. Toby Begg, a 44-year-old father of two, was suited up in his black wetsuit, preparing for his usual Friday morning surf. He carried his bright blue surfboard under his arm, the board smooth and unblemished, contrasting with the warm hues of the beach. The beach was far from empty. 6 other surfers were out in the water enjoying the calm conditions. Toby paddled out, making his way about 500 feet offshore. He positioned himself beyond the breakers, the light morning breeze ruffling his hair as he settled onto his board. He let his legs dangle, the cool ocean water brushing against his skin as he waited for the next wave. To a casual observer, the scene was peaceful, idyllic even. The ocean stretched out endlessly before him, a horizon painted in shades of blue. But beneath the surface, a silent threat moved closer, unseen. A photographer on the beach had been scanning the water with his camera, hoping to capture a pod of dolphins or perhaps an interesting shot of the surfers. When his lens zoomed in on Toby and the others, he unknowingly captured a moment that would come to define the day. In the background of the photograph, there was an odd disturbance in the water, a small patch of turbulence just beneath the surface. It was hard to distinguish at first, but as the photo was later analyzed, it became clear. A massive great white shark over 13 feet in length was moving swiftly through the water just behind Toby. In that fleeting moment, Toby and the other surfer both glanced down, their eyes locking on the patch of churned water. The shark's dark gray shape was unmistakable. With barely a moment to react, the shark struck. Toby barely had time to register the danger before the great white lunged forward, grabbing hold of his legs. The force of the attack was immediate. Its sharp teeth sank deep into his flesh, tearing through muscle and bone. The water erupted into chaos as Toby screamed out in pain, gripping his surfboard with all his strength. His legs were no longer his own. They were in the jaws of a predator determined to secure its meal. Toby fought desperately, thrashing and kicking, but the shark's grip was unyielding. The water around him bubbled violently as the shark thrashed its head from side to side, its powerful body undeterred by his resistance. The bright blue surfboard became a splash of color amidst the violence, the surface punctured and torn by the shark's brutal attack. As the seconds passed, the other surfers raced toward Toby. They could see the battle unfolding from a distance. With each movement, the shark seemed intent on dragging him under, but Toby refused to surrender. His strength was waning, but his will to survive remained unwavering. The shark paused for a moment, giving Toby a brief respite, but only to adjust its grip before attacking again. For what felt like an eternity, the attack continued. Witnesses on the beach stood frozen, unable to help as the struggle unfolded just offshore. The shark's massive form loomed in the water, each attack sending ripples across the surface, marking Toby's blood in the water. Finally, after more than 30 seconds of intense struggle, the shark released its hold and swam off into the depths. Toby, bruised and battered, struggled to stay afloat. His wetsuit was shredded, the blood from his wounds mixing with the salt water. Desperately, he clung to his surfboard, using the last of his strength to paddle toward the shore. Behind him, a blood trail spread across the water, a grim reminder of the vicious encounter. Once on the beach, the extent of Toby's injuries became clear. His legs were a horror of torn flesh. His right leg was severed below the knee, and a deep gash ran from his hip down to his calf. The other leg was severely mauled below the knee, the damage almost beyond comprehension. His wetsuit, once intact, was now nothing more than tattered scraps, stained with red. Lauren Enfield, another surfer who had witnessed the attack, rushed to alert others on the beach. A mother and daughter nearby immediately dialed emergency services. As Toby lay on the sand, his eyes vacant, shock set in. A teenage girl stood nearby, stunned, unable to look away from the gruesome scene. Toby, though conscious, was frozen, his gaze fixed as the reality of his injuries sank in. Somehow, amid the panic, an emergency doctor was on the beach that day. The doctor rushed to Toby's side and helped stabilize him until further assistance arrived. With quick thinking, the group managed to fashion a tourniquet from Toby's surfboard leash, securing it tightly around his leg to slow the bleeding. Sticks were used to form a makeshift splint, keeping his legs straight as they awaited the arrival of paramedics. Within moments, Toby was rushed to Port Macquarie Base Hospital in critical condition. His injuries were severe, but the swift actions of those on the beach had kept him alive. Doctors worked quickly to stabilize him, though it became clear that one of his legs could not be saved. After multiple surgeries, Toby was airlifted to John Hunter Hospital in Newcastle, where surgeons attempted to salvage the remaining leg. By the time this story is being shared, Toby is in stable but serious condition. His recovery will be long, filled with pain and fraught with challenges. His brother-in-law set up a GoFundMe page to support Toby's family as he faces not only a physical recovery but a significant loss of income as the primary breadwinner. The shark responsible for the attack was believed to be a great white based on the bite marks and the description of the attack. Authorities had been aware of sharks in the area, with small drum lines having captured 3 sharks in the area just the day before, including one at Lighthouse Beach. Critics argue that drum lines, while intended to protect swimmers, often have unintended consequences, attracting more predators to the area and harming other marine life in the process. On May 7, 1959, a warm spring evening drew 18-year-old Albert Kogler and his friend Shirley O'Neill to San Francisco's Baker Beach. The unseasonably mild weather provided the perfect escape from their college routines. With the Golden Gate Bridge towering in the distance and the sun casting long golden rays across the Pacific, the scene seemed idyllic. The pair arrived eager to enjoy the serenity of the beach, unaware of the hidden dangers lurking beyond the waves. 18-year-old Albert Kogler and Shirley O'Neill first met at a freshman dance and instantly connected. Both shared a common bond as residents of San Francisco's Sunset District and students at San Francisco State College. Albert was pursuing a degree in business and finance, inspired by his father's successful career as an investment broker in Corte Madera. On the warm evening of May 7, 1959, Albert suggested to Shirley that they head to the beach for a swim, a perfect way to enjoy the unseasonably mild weather. As they settled on a blanket near the shore, their conversation turned reflective. Albert noticed the golden cross Shirley wore and asked about her faith. She spoke earnestly about her Catholic beliefs, while Albert, less devout, admitted his curiosity about life after death. The exchange added a contemplative tone to their evening, a prelude to the unimaginable events that would soon unfold. How does a peaceful swim under a glowing sky turn into a fight for survival? The water, though brisk at 57 degrees, glistened invitingly under the fading sun. It was a quiet evening with no one on the water. Albert and Shirley waded in, laughing as they swam about 50 yards from the shore. The ocean seemed calm, the kind of evening that promised timeless memories. Yet, hidden beneath the waves, a great white shark, estimated to be nearly 12 feet long, moved silently toward its unsuspecting prey. The predator, a master of stealth and power, was about to strike with devastating force. Suddenly, a sharp cry broke the tranquility. Albert screamed as a massive shape lunged from the depths. Shirley turned in shock to see a slick gray body arching 6 feet out of the water. It struck Albert with great force, dragging him below the surface as waves churned violently around him. The water darkened with a plume of red. Albert managed to resurface, gasping for air, and shouted that it was a shark. Shirley, frozen for a moment, heard his panicked voice telling her to swim for safety. She obeyed instinctively, paddling frantically toward the shore, but stopped mid-stroke. Albert's voice still called out, weaker this time. Looking back, she saw him struggling, his arm hanging limply at his side, barely attached to his body. Determined not to abandon him, Shirley turned back into the cold, turbulent waters. She reached him quickly, her heart pounding as she noticed the extent of his injuries. Blood flowed freely from a massive wound on his left side, the telltale sign of a single ferocious bite from the shark. The monstrous animal had already fled, but Albert's condition was critical. Fighting through the shock, she grabbed Albert under his back and urged him to float on his back to conserve energy. With immense effort, Shirley began towing him toward the shore. Can sheer willpower and faith triumph in the face of overwhelming tragedy? On the beach, U.S. Army Master Sergeant Leo Day, who had been walking nearby, witnessed the horrifying attack. He ran to his car and called for help before hurrying to the water's edge. Onlookers began to gather, shouting encouragement to Shirley as she fought against the currents to bring Albert to safety. The sea seemed to conspire against her, with every wave threatening to pull them back. Yet she pressed on, moment by grueling moment, until her feet touched the sand. With help from those on shore, Shirley managed to pull Albert onto the beach. His body was cold and pale, his breathing shallow. His left arm was nearly severed, and deep lacerations ran across his chest and shoulder. Blood pooled around him, staining the sand. The group quickly covered him with a blanket while Shirley knelt by his side, cradling his head. Emergency services had been called, but the terrain made it difficult for rescue vehicles to reach the beach. The Coast Guard was on its way, but every minute felt like an eternity. Shirley, recalling their earlier conversation about faith, clutched the gold cross around her neck and spoke softly to Albert. She reminded him of his belief in God, though he had never been especially religious. Using seawater, she performed a baptism right there on the sand. Her voice trembled as she whispered prayers, holding his gaze. Albert's lips moved faintly as he repeated the act of contrition, his voice barely audible. "I love God. I love my mom and dad," he managed to stutter before his body went still. Shirley watched as his eyes fluttered closed. By the time the Coast Guard arrived to rush him to Letterman Army Hospital at the Presidio, Albert had succumbed to his injuries. It was 8:15 p.m. when he was pronounced dead, his parents at his bedside. In the days following the attack, investigators noted the extreme rarity of such an event in California's coastal waters. Shark attacks were almost unheard of in the area, with this being only the second recorded incident in the state's history. The unusual nature of the attack and its devastating outcome captured widespread attention, highlighting both the unpredictability of the ocean's predators and the extraordinary courage Shirley demonstrated in attempting to save Albert. Shirley's actions did not go unnoticed. In July of that year, California Governor Edmund Brown nominated her for the Young American Medal for Bravery, which she later received from President John F. Kennedy at the White House. 2 years later, she was also awarded the Carnegie Hero Fund Commission Medal for her heroic efforts to save Albert. Yet, no medal could erase the haunting memory of that evening or bring back the young man whose life had been so tragically cut short. Thank you for watching the worst shark attacks ever recorded. If you want to see more, we have a massive compilation of the worst pet owners being attacked by their exotic animals. Click now to watch the video. We hope to see you there.